colleagues, I hereby call this meeting of the Continuing Advisory Committee for Special Education for the state of Texas to order. Hope y'all are having a lot of fun this summer. My name is Jen Stratton. I am the chair of the CAC, and please forgive my blacked out screen. I am having internet issues here at the ESC, and this seems to be the only way that my internet is going to function. As we are all aware, the CAC's duties are to advise TEA of unmet needs within the state in the education of children with disabilities, comment publicly on any rules or regulations proposed by the state, advise TEA in developing evaluations and reporting on data to the secretary under Section 618 of the Act, advise TEA in developing corrective action plans to address findings identified in federal monitoring reports under Part B of the Act, advise TEA in developing and implementing policies relating to the coordination of services for children with disabilities, and advise TEA in setting standards related to the significant disproportionality determination. As we are all aware, we are well on our way to doing the required work to submit our report to the legislature by the end of December of this year. So with all of that, let us start our comments and updates from TEA. Dr. Porter?
Right. A couple of the things that I know y'all wanted updates on. First and foremost, we talked last time about having worked with a committee, a subcommittee from the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities related to digital curriculum accessibility. And just a 2-second update on that. We anticipate having that draft ready to go back to the Governor's Committee. It's been with TEA for an insanely long time. To go back to the Governor's Committee at their next meeting. I don't think I have a date for that meeting yet. It should be early August though. And then go from there. The next steps with that committee or with that report really are then at that point the Governor's Committee or members of the committee will have to sort of carry it forward to the state board and see if the state board wants to take any action on some of those. And there's also some policy implications I think there from TEA. Would also be something that I'm sure members of the legislature would be interested in. Much of the report really talks about the need to go above and beyond minimal compliance with stuff in order to actually make things accessible. And so that just in and of itself probably will lead most folks to believe that minimal compliance isn't enough. That maybe something legislative might also need to be done to increase accessibility for kids. And I think the last time, and I'm not an expert in this area at all, but the last time we saw any shift in those sort of requirements has been quite some time, and technology has advanced significantly in that amount of time. And so there's probably more things available that could be made required by law if someone chose to do so. So we'll see what happens with that report. I will once we send it to the Govs Committee, if their executive director is okay with it, I will forward it to Stephanie to share with this group as well. I know there's plenty of folks on here who are interested in it, but if they give me the okay, which I can't see why they wouldn't, I'll share it with y'all as well. In addition to that, I know y'all. Oh, sorry, Aaron, go ahead. Is that Aaron?
Sorry, Jen and my computers right next to each other, so this is kind of weird. Yes, for the purposes of our legislative report, the information from the Digital Curriculum Advisory Committee report would be extremely helpful. And having been the main instigator of that along with Ron, if I need to go to Ron to ask him for it, let me know. But as you said, I don't think they'll have any problem sharing it.
Yeah, I can't imagine they would. Yep. All right. The other major thing as far as legislative updates, really, Senate Bill 89 from the last.
I think you may be on mute.
Oh, am I on mute? Am I muted?
Or I can't hear you anymore.
I'm not muted. Are you hearing me now? Okay, sorry. Maybe there's gremlins in Zoom today. Or Zoom just doesn't want to hear any more stories about bad pictures of me. The Senate Bill 89 from the 87th legislative session required school districts to do several things related to documentation around services that were or were not provided to students during COVID shutdown and at-home learning. Y'all will remember that. And so as a part of that, we required LEAs to not only do that, but then to sign assurances for us, go into our legal framework resource and assure to us that they had completed those required activities. They were required to be completed by May 1st, and we asked them to assure to us by June 1st that they had completed, and we are at almost, I think, 100%. Susan Bynum probably has I see her face right there in front of me, unfortunately for Susan, that that we probably are at almost 100% there. Last time I checked, we had like 2 or 3 districts that hadn't assured yet.
We had one that we were still waiting on, and they just requested access to the legal framework day before yesterday. So I anticipate that if it's not done, it'll be done this week.
Awesome. Thanks, Susan. Yeah, so out of the 1,200 and what are we up to, 1,222 LEAs now, all but one has given assurances that they've completed with their Senate Bill 89 requirements. So that's good stuff. And then going forward, of course, telling us in the legal framework that you've complied is one thing, and then but actually us checking is another. And so that's being folded into our cyclical monitoring process now. So as our monitoring division pulls folders from LEAs that are in cyclical monitoring, if they are folders of children that were enrolled during that required time period, they will be looking for Senate Bill 89 compliance as well. And so we've informed districts of that going forward. So it will be part of the monitoring process there. So any questions about Senate Bill 89? Really, for districts who kind of followed our guidance, we throughout the process, it shouldn't have been very much more work for them to do, if any. But if they didn't follow our guidance through that, then we did hear we had some districts that were playing catch up at the end of the sort of time frame, trying to get it all done. But by and large, I think folks were a little bit ahead of the game with it, hopefully. In addition to that, while we're on the topic of assurances, and this leads into the next discussion around OSEP, we, as part of our commitment and our communication plan around the changes in the State Board of Education's dyslexia handbook, we gave districts a couple of documents that we required them to post links to on their webpage. This is a little bit of in the weeds, but we've had some issues in the past with folks actually downloading documents, tweaking them slightly, and then posting them to their webpage, like putting personalization stuff on it, nothing like changing policy or whatever. And that has gotten flagged by OSEP and by some advocates as probably not good practice. And so this time we actually requested them to post the links to the TEA documents on their websites. And they had to assure to us by June 1st that they had done that, in addition to cleaning up any of their own internal or external facing communication around dyslexia, so that it was reflective of the information or the changes in the handbook, which y'all will remember the major change there. There were some changes around screening as well, but the major change there was moving from the dual pathway to identification for dyslexia to a single pathway through an IDEA evaluation. And so trying to make sure that folks are as crystal clear in that as possible, and that there's not any room for confusion on the part of parents or schools as they're going forward with folks that are kids that they suspect might have dyslexia. So the districts needed to assure that for us by the 1st of July, and OSEP didn't necessarily require us to do this part, but we are going to, between now and September 1st, it's an all hands on deck activity for all the folks in both the monitoring division and the program side and special education at TEA we're going to check every single website. And so we will have 100% compliance with that by the 1st of September, because when we go through processes like that, if someone assured to us that they did it and we actually go to their website and we can't find it, we reach out to that special education director and say, hey, we're having trouble finding this. 9 times out of 10, it's because we couldn't find it. It's not because they didn't do it. But we will either find it, or we'll make sure that everybody that said they did it actually has done it by the 1st of September. So that'll be out there. And then we'll provide that information to OSEP. We submitted our final last fall, and y'all might remember this as well. I assume that everybody remembers everything I'm talking about because it's just a part of my life every single day. But so if you don't, please stop me. But last fall, the Department of Education put some special conditions on Texas's IDEA B grant related to our status of noncompliance. And what they required from us for those special conditions was a bi-monthly submission of data related to status on our communications plan around the changes in the dyslexia handbook, and then every single monitoring corrective action that was closed out related to dyslexia in that time frame. And so literally in December, February, April, and June, we submitted literally hundreds, if not thousands, of documents to OSEP related to the closeout of those monitoring activities, and then an update on our communications plan around dyslexia. And so our final submission required of those special conditions was on June 15th, and we submitted that, I think, a week early, and haven't heard a thing back. I don't know that given OSEP's track record, I'm not sure if or when we'll ever hear back about that. But I will say that the current we have a couple of different staff members that we're interacting with at OSEP, and they are much more responsive than has been our experience in the past, and actually actually responding to emails and having meetings with us on a regular basis and that sort of thing, which wasn't necessarily the case for a very long time after our initial finding of noncompliance. So that's encouraging, at least, but nothing really of substance that would give me any reason to say we're going to be out of noncompliance anytime soon. The state of Texas, that's our position, that we are in compliance with IDEA, and we have said that to them on multiple occasions, and continue to provide them with any documentation that they request about that going forward. So we'll just see what happens, and if we have some news, this group will be among the first to hear, but we'll just see. The other, let me see. Oh, other legislative updates. Are there any questions about OSEP before I move on? I feel like a broken record with them. We haven't heard anything. We haven't heard anything. We haven't heard anything. The other legislative activity that's happening right now, as y'all are aware, is the Legislative Commission on Special Education Funding. They've met several times this spring. Last time was in June. We probably aren't going to have a meeting in July, it looks like. We're probably going to meet in early August. They've been at the end of the month, and I think they just couldn't find a date that worked well for July, so they're having one at the beginning of August. They've heard from several stakeholders. They heard from lots of superintendents, lots of CFOs. They've heard from this last meeting. They heard from small and rural school districts. They heard from the Texas School for the Deaf, Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. They heard from 2 different regional day school programs for the deaf, one from an ESC and one from a North Texas area district. And just trying to get some information on how those funding streams work, because they're very different from sort of how an LEA is funded. And what's coalescing really is from the commission is a desire to see some sort of change from the current settings-based funding model to something that's more intensity-based. They heard from Florida. I think I might have mentioned this to y'all before. They heard from Florida, who has a matrix type system that gets them to more of an intensity-based funding for each individual kid. The Florida system, one of the downsides to this, and that's been pointed out to the commission, this is a limitation to the system that even the people in Florida actually have pointed out to us, is that their IEP teams, who are our committees, spend considerable time doing more paperwork on that matrix rather than just submitting data and having some sort of behind the scenes calculation. They actually do it. They actually do the crosswalk and all that stuff. And then they come up with a number that's put into the system that drives the funding. And I think that we hear consistently from absolutely everyone that has anything to do with special education that our committees have enough paperwork, that the art facilitators, the diagnosticians, everyone is just overwhelmed with paperwork at that in that process. And so perhaps a model that requires more paperwork from that team is not going to be what we want to follow. And so kind of what I think one of the things that they've asked us to explore is something that we could do that where data could be pulled. Maybe there's going to have to be a change in the system in order to make anything really change, changing how some data is collected from LEAs and then using that sort of in the system to do a similar process to what maybe the Matrix might have done, putting kids into some kind of tier, I think is one of the things that they're interested in hearing. I do know that y'all have some public testimony today on this topic from Disability Rights Texas, and they have a plan that they have submitted to the commission as well to look at. So that tries to get at some sort of intensity of service model. But I'll keep you all updated on that as we go forward. They have a report due to the legislature by December 1st. And I think along with that report, they probably are going to want to have some model legislation drafted as part of that process. So if you all have input for them, don't hesitate to submit it either to me or to our government relations folks at TEA, and they'll make sure that the committee chair gets it for sure. If you want to just put something in writing, that's probably the best way to do that. But I think that was everything that I wanted to cover today. Are there any particular questions, or Stephanie, did I miss anything that was on the list? I don't have it up in front of me.
No, sir, you covered it all.
Any questions? All right. Thanks, y'all. Have a great rest of your meeting.
Thank you, Justin. With that, I'd like to call up Brittany Brettschneider, the attorney and Office of the General Counsel, to lead us in some brief training and housekeeping items for committee members. For those of us who are more seasoned, it's a nice refresher, and for our new folk, it is a needed reminder. Thank you, Brittany.
All right, good morning, y'all. I apologize. Y'all are going to be exposed to my raspy voice. I'm pregnant and I cannot take all the medicine I would like right now during my summer allergies. So hopefully it's not too bothersome.
Congratulations, Brittany.
Thank you. I'm actually due soon, so 3-ish weeks to go. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I have a simple PowerPoint. As Jen said, many of you probably already know this, and it'll be a refresher, hopefully. It's not too long, but it does have some vital key points that we should all keep in mind. So let's get this PowerPoint up. There we go. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So as you know, y'all are the CAC. This is the orientation, coming a little late into y'all's start. So the state must establish and maintain an advisory committee for the purpose of providing policy guidance with respect to special education and the related services. So that's why you all are here. The 17 CAC members are appointed by the governor. As you know, a majority of the members must be individuals with disabilities or parents of children with disabilities. And there are also specific roles made for the CAC to be made up of very certain individuals involved with things concerning special education and education of children with disabilities. So this could include a whole slew of things. Here's our list. As we've said, parents of children with disabilities, individuals with disabilities, teachers, representatives of institutions of higher education that prepare special education and related services, state and local education officials, administrators of programs for children with disabilities, representatives of other state agencies involved in the financing or delivery of these services, representatives of private schools and public charter schools, not less than one representative of a vocational community or business organization concerned with transition services, representatives from the state child welfare agency responsible for foster care, and representatives from the state juvenile and adult corrections agencies. So the special rule, a majority of the members of the panel must be individuals with disabilities or parents of children with disabilities. So the following duties are a list of the most important duties of the CAC required under IDEA. And if you give me a moment, I'm going to move you guys so I can see my full slide. There we go. So these include advising TEA on unmet needs within Texas in the education of children with disabilities, commenting publicly on any rules or regulations proposed by the state regarding the education of children with disabilities, advising TEA in developing evaluations and reporting on data to the U.S. Department of Education, advise TEA in developing corrective action plans to address findings identified in the federal monitoring reports, advising TEA in developing and implementing policies relating to the coordination of services for the children with disabilities. Also, IDEA requires that states collect and examine data to determine whether significant disproportionality based on race and ethnicity is occurring in the state with respect to the identification of students with disability, which includes the identification of students with disabilities in accordance to a particular impairment, the placement in the particular education settings of the children, and the incidence, duration, and type of disciplinary actions. Excuse me. In selecting risk ratio thresholds, the state must base its selection on the advice of stakeholders, which includes you guys, the state advisory panel. Here are some additional duties required by state law. The CAC must develop a policy to encourage public participation with the committee. And by January 1st of each odd numbered year, the CAC must submit a report to the legislature with recommendations for state law changes, agency rules relating to special education. And this report also would include the CAC's policy on encouraging public participation. And okay, now we're to the Open Meetings Act. So according to state law, the CAC is subject to the Open Meeting Act that requires a quorum to be present at each meeting. A quorum may deliberate only at duly noticed CAC meetings, and all members must be trained on the Open Meetings Act. The committee has a set of bylaws that should be revisited, reviewed, and revised annually. And every committee member should be familiar with and have a good understanding of those bylaws. So representing a stakeholder group, this is significant for the CAC. It's kind of what makes up the CAC. It makes you guys special. It's your role to come together as a group to advise TEA based on your individual specialized knowledge and experiences. That's why we have that list of who all should be part of the committee. Okay, and an advisory committee is defined as a committee, council, commission, task force, or other entity, excuse me, with multiple members that has as its primary function advising a state agency in the executive branch of state government. And I wish I had highlighted advising because, oh, excuse me, let me go back. Should I skip? Oh, I was just saying, I can just tell you guys what it said, but advising is different than advocating, as we all know. Advising means to inform, counsel, recommend, suggest, guide. It does not mean pleading a case or position and favoring an individual argument. So you guys are meant to be advisors, not advocates per se. And this is just reinforcing that idea. It's a Texas Attorney General opinion, number JC 0161. It was a question based on a different agency and their counsel, but it was asked if they could engage in lobbying activities. The response was no, you cannot use federal and state funds to lobby. So consequently, this applies to TEA and its advisory committee. So we just want to reinforce that idea that you guys cannot lobby using, and TEA as well, cannot lobby using federal and state funds and shouldn't be making statements to the media, et cetera, stuff like that in a individual, or I'm sorry, in a representative capacity of TEA or the advisory committee. So another law reinforcing this idea is Texas Government Code 556.006. It just reinforces the idea the state agency may not use appropriated money to attempt to influence the passage or defeat of legislative measures. It doesn't prohibit a state officer or employee from using state resources to provide public information or provide information responsive to a request. Again, that means you guys give us information, educate, and guide, don't lobby. And I'm probably restating the obvious, but educating means explaining the needs, providing data, describing what has worked in the past and what hasn't, versus lobbying is educating and then asking for something like the sponsorship of a bill or support or opposing a certain bill or an allocation of funds, etc. So consensus decision-making is what we recommend rather than voting to reach agreements on these group decisions. Consensus is a process for decision-making that involves all members. The final decision is one that all members can live with and publicly support. So focus on expressing ideas, opinions about the big picture in state special education. This would include making sure to participate, be positive, be open to others' positions, know that you're responsible for the success of y'all's decisions, make sure you're staying informed, realize there's a bit of a give and take so that you are open to all sides of the positions. Be open to learning from one another, sharing common understandings, consider multiple options, make decisions by modifying options, and live with and publicly support the final decision. And finally, but not at all the least important, FERPA, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, is a federal law. It protects the privacy of students' personally identifiable information in education records. FERPA applies to all educational institutions that receive federal funds. Accordingly, please try to follow FERPA law and maintain student confidentiality at CAC meetings by not disclosing their personally identifiable information. This would include student names, parent names, student's age, grade, student's school, and any other information that would directly identify a student if disclosed. And what I like to do when I think of this is if you can talk to a group of people and put together 3 facts and kind of guess who that person is talking about, then those 3 facts shouldn't have been included. So try to keep that in mind. School districts are small communities, and any combination of facts can quickly help identify who students are. So we want to avoid that at all costs. So that's all I have for you guys, unless you have any questions. I'm going to stop sharing. Are there any questions?
Brittany? Yeah, Brittany, I'm sorry. This is Agatha Thibodeau. I was wondering if you could go back to that slide where you were speaking to advocacy versus, yes. I'm sorry, I missed that. I was doing some stuff with the notes.
Okay, so I'm not sure, let me find the slide, but with respect to advocating, as a CAC committee through TEA, y'all cannot lobby or advocate for one specific opinion. Obviously, y'all are individuals and in your own capacity, that's different. But with respect to the CAC decisions and what y'all are trying to pass, that's where you come in as just educators and guiders. We can't use federal funding and state funding to be lobbyists per se. And if you want me to share my screen again.
Yeah, I understood that part. It was just, I guess the way our charter is written and we're to advise, I don't know. For some reason, I got a bit confused there.
Yeah, so y'all are advisory people. So within respect of this capacity in the CAC, y'all want to make sure to educate and let people know all sides and advise, not say there is only one position that we need. This is the position that we should be enforcing. And as a CAC, we are asking for that position. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I was just curious how that relates, because we also are supposed to look at policy and advise on policy changes. So I was
Yes.
just kind of, and sometimes that's to the language, and so I was just making sure that.
Yeah, I understand. Policy is a little different, though. You're saying policy is different than like legislative rulemaking. But as far as policy goes, that's like decisions on how you would approach something per se, and y'all are expected to consider all sides and consider the best way to approach. So policy is slightly different than rulemaking or lobbying for like a legislative change.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Agatha, this is Aaron. One thing that we did at the Governance Committee, and it is a fine line, but one thing you can do is you can, as a private citizen, say, I support this bill or I oppose this bill, those sorts of things. You just can't say, as a member of the Continuing Advisory Committee for Special Education, I oppose this, or I don't, or I support this, or those sorts of things.
We
One
can
other-
only speak on behalf of ourselves as individuals and not on behalf of the committee.
Right,
Yes.
yeah. So just make clear, Aaron, not Aaron as a member of the committee. The other thing we can do, or at least this is sort of how we did it, and Brittany, if you have thoughts on it, you're welcome to do it, which is we can say that a particular bill or think policy or something like that is either consistent with, or we believe one of our recommendations from our legislative report may support a particular bill, or at least be aligned with that, or somehow that our policy recommendations and our legislative report may suggest something that is contradictory to something like that. So we can point out how what we've written as a recommendation does or doesn't align with something, but we don't say, therefore we oppose a bill or we support a bill because of that. So that's going up to the line of stopping of just being informative, raising awareness of what our policy recommendations and what they were intended for, versus saying, yes, we want to see this, or no, we don't want to see that.
Yes, perfectly said. Thank you. Are there any other questions? No? All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening, and welcome.
Thank you, Brittany. We will now hear from Jerry Klikoda. I hope I said that right, and if I didn't, I am really sorry. He is the manager of the technical assistance team to talk about on-the-job training and transition and funding availability. This was per a request from our members back in April to hear about the available on-the-job training funding as part of transition, and a handout had been emailed yesterday. Jerry, are you with us?
Yes, I am. And I've also put the handout in the chat, so you can look at that way too.
Fantastic. Please enlighten us.
Okay. Basically, right now I'm over the transition specialist position, which is open, and usually I would have had her or him give me some of this information, but I've reached out also to the network to make sure I've covered all my bases. At this time, if you look at the handout, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and make sure I have the right one. Let's see. And no, that's not what you need to look at. There we go. Is that big enough for y'all to see? Okay.
Yeah, there you go. That's better.
Okay, good. And you also have the copy in the chat that you can pull up. Basically, there's two main funding sources beyond just the local funding sources that a local district or a charter school might have access to. When you look at the IDEA B funds that LEAs, local education agencies, receive, The first one is from the Special Education Consolidated Grant Application. And they do have funds that are available if the district so chooses to allocate those. Oops. Some reason that's down. Okay, let me click there. Sorry about that. It's on pages 45 to 46. You can do, it's under stipends for non-employees, which includes students, and they can use those IDEA-B funds, but it has to be within a student's course of study and in conjunction with the student's transition plan. And then they also have to follow the general supplement, not supplant requirement, which is basically if they're using local dollars within the district to pay students to do on-the-job kind of trainings, things like that, internships and such, then they cannot use federal funds to do that because federal funds are limited. And we have some factors right through here that talk about, would it be benefiting the local education agency? And if they do benefit the local education agency, they can't use the federal funds for that. They can still use local funds, they just can't use the federal funds. And I'm just going to scroll up. And this is directly out of the grant. It talks about you can use it for non-employee employee stipends, which are students' employments. Yes, for student employments, this is under IDEA-B formula, which every LEA gets if they have students with disabilities. And then the other one that we have available is through the Texas Workforce Commission, the vocational rehabilitation. They do have a funding source to pay for internships, and that would be coordinated with the local VR counselor that's assigned to that district or LEA, and payment would be made through them. But it has to be aligned to the IEP and the transition goals. And I've also included their website that goes right to that area. But those are the two main funding sources beyond just the local funds that school districts have. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jerry. We appreciate you.
My pleasure.
I'd like to now call on an old favorite of our committee, Mr. Keith Swink, to update us on some proposed rule text. Keith, it's always a pleasure to have you in front of us.
Hey, everybody. I'm recovering from surgery, so please forgive me if I'm not, it's not working. Well, anyway. Okay, so forgive me if I'm not quite up to par. So we're going to, did everybody get the copy of the rule, the proposed rule? Y'all have that in front of you? Since you know what I'm talking about.
I know that an email was received. I received it my own self. Everyone should have it. If not, now would be a fine time to let us know.
Yeah, okay, so if you don't have it, please let me know. We can send it back to you. So in looking at it, what we're doing under 89-1080, this is Texas Administrative Code. So in a previous rule revision that we did, we were changing all of the verbiage when it refers to a student who has a hearing impairment, changing that, updating it to read a student who is deaf or hard of hearing. And we just missed one of the references. And so in 89.1080, we're fixing that. That's all that is. There's a change being made to 89.1185, which is due process hearing procedures. And I'm going to let Brittany explain that because it's above my head.
Sure. So in 89.1185, this was already law that we hopefully were following, but we just wanted to make it very clear in response to new guidance that they put out to, I think it was the most recent letter to Perry Cal, emphasizing that all parties have to agree to summary processes, so summary judgments. So we put it in rule. We basically just add language that specifically states that any summary proceedings may only be used when both parties consent to the use of the summary process, because that may result in giving up certain rights to presenting evidence or cross-examining and confronting witnesses and compelling attendance of witnesses. So we just put it in writing. It really doesn't change our actual practice, but it's there to show that we are following the law.
Thanks, Brittany. And then the last rule that it's being changed is 89-1195. And the first significant change is in subsection C. If for those of you who have been around complaints for a while, you know that one of the criterion for filing a complaint is for the complainant to provide a copy of the complaint to the public education agency against which the complaint is filed. So in other words, if a complaint is filed against, District A, then the complainant has to provide the copy of the complaint to District A. OSEP has said that states do have the leeway to provide a copy of the complaint themselves, rather than asking the complainant to do that. And so there have been instances, not a whole lot over the years, but there have been instances where the complainant did not provide a copy of the complaint to the public agency. And so we, even after we followed up with the complainant asking them to do so, and so we end up having to close those complaints because they didn't meet criteria for an idea. And so we're just, we're going to allow, and I realize I'm not talking about subsection C. I'm sorry. Right now I'm talking about subsection D. I apologize. And so now we're just putting into rule what OSEP has said that we can do, which is if we get a complaint and everything else meets requirements for a SPED complaint, then we are going to be able to send that complaint to the public education agency on behalf of the complainant, and just try to do that to help alleviate any kind of barriers that there might be. On subsection C, I do apologize again. We're putting into rule the business practice that's been in place at least for the past 17 years that I've been here. And it just basically it explains when the 60-day timeline for a complaint actually starts, and when that 1 calendar year statute of limitations for a complaint actually starts. And it's like I said, it's no different than what we've been doing. We're just trying to make it clearer for folks. Under subsection E 1B, we've also added this. It's always been the requirement for school districts to provide a copy of the notice of procedural safeguards the first time during a school year that a parent files a special education complaint. We're just putting it into rule as well, just to help school districts remember to do that. And we are also just notifying the public that we are, when we send out the notices for complaints, we're attaching the notice of procedural safeguards to parents as well, so that they have a copy. But really the onus of providing a hard copy of the notice of the procedural safeguards is on the school district. And so that's all that subsection is just clarifying. in subsection H, I, and J, what we're going to do is kind of extend, not really extend, that's not the right word. We're putting into TAC the authority that we have under IDEA to resolve any kind of, to find and resolve any kind of non-compliance related to special ed. And what this is going to allow us to do is to kind of have the authority to investigate a complaint that is, quote, credible, but that might not meet the criteria under IDEA for a formal special education. Stephanie, I don't think we want it on screen. For a formal special education complaint. And what this is going to allow us to do, if we get a complaint in that is credible, meaning it's not anonymous, it's still received within the 1-year statute of limitations, and it includes sufficient detail that allows us to see that, yes, something might be going on, then we can reach out to school districts and do a desk audit or an on-site review, make a determination about what's going on based on the documentation that's provided, and then issue corrective actions. An example of this, we've had some instances over the years, things like, we've gotten complaints about, there's a child that I know of, this is just a hypothetical, but this is along the same lines. There's a child that I know of in my church, and his mom was telling me that he got kicked out of school because of his behavior, even though he's in special ed. And I don't know, I know his name, but I don't know his address, but I'm letting y'all know that this is going on. Well, under IDEA, we have to have the student's address in order to initiate a formal special education complaint investigation. So if this friend of the family didn't know the kid's address, then there's literally nothing we could do in terms of investigating it through the formal IDEA process. And so what this is going to allow us to do is to give us a little bit more leeway and maybe be able to investigate that particular issue, as long as, again, the complaint's not anonymous and it has sufficient information showing what's going on, and it's happened within the past calendar year. And then we are going to continue the reconsideration process for these types of complaints as well, and that's just to allow us the opportunity to fix anything if we get something wrong in the report that has an adverse impact on the outcome. I know that's a lot of information, and I apologize, but if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Steve, I've got something real quick. Just out of curiosity, what is the timing on these rule amendments? How soon are we expecting them to come into play?
Typically, I think we are trying to put this into the register, post this to the register in August. It may be September, but we're hoping for August. There's a 30-day comment period, which I need to talk to y'all about. Don't let me forget. There's a 30-day comment period, and then we respond to the comments, finalize everything. If we need to change rule based on the comments, then we do, and then we post it for adoption. So our hope is that these will be adopted toward the beginning of the spring, and because of the amount of time it takes to do public comment and stuff. So hopefully at the beginning of the spring.
Thank
One
you.
thing, yeah. So to make, because one of y'all's, as Brittany was pointing out, one of the responsibilities of the committee is to make comment on rule. If you all want to make a committee comment, then what you need to do in this meeting, because you have to do it with the quorum, is write whatever that comment or comments might be. And then once this gets posted to the register, Stephanie will let you know, either Stephanie or I'll let you know when it got posted. And then y'all can provide that comment using the information in the register. But if you want to, of course, comment individually, you can. You don't have to do that as a committee. But if you want to comment as a committee, then I think this is the last meeting you have before this will be posted in the register for public comment.
Thank you, Keith. On that note, Aaron, would you like to come up and have a comment?
I don't know if this is for Keith
No,
or Brittany.
I'm sorry, the comment, are you commenting on the rule?
Or is this a question?
It's a question about the rule that was put in front
Okay.
of us.
Okay.
In terms of wording. So I don't know if it's for Brittany or Keith, but if I understand correctly, when the term must or shall is used, that is a requirement that has to be done. The term may means that that is one of potentially multiple acceptable ways of doing something. Is that fair to say? So at the end, the last clause of 1185D, it says may only when something may only be done when both parties agree. So was the intent there that that is allowed, but you don't have to do it, or was the intent of that particular addition, edit, indeed to be actually you're required to have the consent of both parties?
You have to have the consent of both parties, but we have to put may there because we cannot tell a administrative law judge what to do. It's in their discretion. If they don't think that a summary judgment process is appropriate in the matter, then it doesn't. If they want to hear every single witness, then they're going to say no. Even if both parties want a summary judgment, we are going to hear all of the witnesses and all of the evidence. So that one's a little bit of a combination of the two. But yeah, if the judge and both parties all agree, then summary judgment is acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
If there are no further questions for Keith, I would like to introduce the idea, or is there a sense of the body here that we would like to issue a public statement on these rule changes? By your silence, I do not get the sense that this committee feels it necessary at this time to comment as a committee. Therefore, I leave it to the individual members to comment as they see fit. Thank you, Keith and Brittany, for that update. We appreciate it.
Thank y'all. Take care.
We will have one other member of TEA staff coming to address us after 10:30 a.m. Her name is Marilyn Cook. She is the Director of Education Certification, but unfortunately she is in another meeting right now and will not be able to join us until after 10:30 a.m. With that, and with the body's permission, I would like to jump down in our agenda to public comment. As I am aware, there is one member of the public that wishes to address our committee. Stephanie, do we have anyone other than Mr. Alleman?
I do not know of anybody else.
Okay. Mr. Alleman, feel free to come here and I will adjust computer accordingly so that you have the floor.
Wow. Thanks. It's great to be here in person and see everybody, at least to some extent, see everybody. I'll go ahead and begin my public comment then. Good morning. My name is Stephen Alamon. I'm with Disability Rights Texas. I'm making public comment this morning with regard to special education finance reform. As you heard Dr. Porter state earlier in your meeting, there is currently the Texas Commission on Special Education Funding. It's a group currently meeting and ultimately preparing a report for the legislature by the end of this year. We are recommending that the CAC, as part of their legislative report, include a section devoted to special education funding reform as well. It's important to us that the legislature know that the special ed community is of the same mind, that it's time for improvements to our special ed funding system. You have received a handout by email with some details. What I would request is that the CAC, in addition to substantively addressing our recommendations about an intensity service model that Dr. Porter alluded to, with details, some details in my handout as public comment, we also ask that the CAC send a statement to the commission asking that all recommendations be adopted unanimously. Again, it's important that the special ed community speak with one voice to the 88th legislature, and we would respectfully ask that you put on your agenda for your next meeting the adoption of a statement to the commission asking the commission to only endorse unanimously adopted recommendations. Of course, members with other ideas can include those in the appendix to their commission report, but we want the commission report to be as clear as possible that these recommendations are supported by all members of the commission and that other ideas will be included as an attachment. We would appreciate the CAC sending that statement to the commission at your next meeting so that they have time to incorporate that process as they finalize their report this fall. Thank you for your attention, and I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Alamon. Seeing that there is no further request for public comment, we will close public comment and move on to our next agenda item, which is our report. Who's excited? I'm excited. I know Litzinger is excited because this is kind of our jam. Come on, smiles, people. This is going to be fun. I knew I could count on Agatha. Thank you. Agatha, if you wouldn't mind reminding the committee of our subcommittees, and we'll start going down the list of who's met and see who's got some comments regarding what our report is going to look like.
Sorry, let's see. Okay, so our subcommittees are, are funding. Do you want the members of each committee, or everybody should know which subcommittee they're on? Or do you want me to just go over all of it?
Go ahead and go over all of it, just as a reminder. People have slept.
No worries. Okay, so we have the funding committee, which is Joanne, Amy, Diana, and Barbie. And that consisted of like subtopics of checks and balances in instructional arrangement, funding, staff shortages, staff qualifications, Shamika, Teresa, myself, April, and Susan. And we have met as a subcommittee on a couple of occasions. And so we are going, just a quick update, we are going through what our last report entailed and what updates we want to make to any of those recommendations. But really it's a bit of a standing recommendation that we we feel needs to continue. From there, our third subcommittee is the Staffing, Digital Literacy and Accessibility, and that's Aaron and Amy. And then we have Transition Planning, which is Amy, Aaron, and Jen. And then Mental Health and Behavioral Health and Wellness of Staff and Students, and that's myself, Barbie, and Jen. And we've also met and started to go over some of the topics, because it's quite vast.
Thank you, Agatha. Can you repeat the second, sorry.
Transition planning?
Yes.
Okay, yes, transition planning is Amy, Aaron, and Jen.
Okay.
And under that, we just had some long and short term visual options, lack of opportunities, work programs during and post pandemic, and then more robust health and safety standards. I can send this out again.
Okay.
Or
That'd
have
be
it sent out through Stephanie.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. I know that unfortunately the transition subcommittee has not had a chance to meet. I will make that a priority in the next month. So Aaron, Amy, good luck, get ready. I will be sending out a meeting request so that we can light up that candle. Are there other subcommittees that would like to give a more detailed report at this time?
Well, I would just like to add that for the purposes of funding, there has been a hearing of the Education Funding Commission, and they're talking about also adjusting the funding weights. So it's about intensity rather than location and diagnosis. So we can add points that were said by people that testified if we need to in that section of the.
Okay. Certainly, I would encourage all subcommittees to meet as quickly as possible and start getting recommendations, because unfortunately, friends, time is marching on, and it is marching faster than I had anticipated. As we are already in July, we statutorily only have one more meeting in order to finish this report. Now, we will have the ability to call further meetings should this committee decide. But let us not forget that after September 1st, it suddenly starts freewheeling down to December. We have the beginning of the school year upon us. I personally, as the chair of this committee, do not want us to wake up in November and realize we have no report ready to go. I cannot stress enough how important this committee's work is, and that our words and recommendations have the ability to inform lawmakers on how special education will go forward in the state of Texas. If we do not use our voice, who will use theirs? This is our privilege to be able to do so. I look forward to this every year. I would encourage us to take that as seriously as we know others will. And that's your only finger pointing that your chair is going to do, so there. We're all grown-ups, we're all busy, but we've got to make this happen. Agatha, I'm going to call on you because I know that you were the phenomenal note taker of the mental health subcommittee that I got to sit in on. Would you mind enlightening the committee on some of the things that we talked about?
Sorry, I'm trying to click back between notes. Yes, 1 second here. Trying to pull out Well, we started talking a good bit about cameras in the classroom, and that was Jen and Barbie and I in that meeting. And Barbie is a plethora of knowledge on a lot of that, and from the administrative point of view, me being a parent, I mean, and you know, that's just kind of the standpoint that I come from. So, you know, and so we talked about doing a short-term plan and a long-term plan. The short-term plan kind of just being maybe some sort of a marketing plan that reaches out to parents and lets them know that that's something that is something that they can ask for, because not everyone knows. And I think Barbie can speak to a little bit more of what needs to happen from the administrative side on that if she'd like to. But since it's just a quick update, we talked about the line items of the administrative code and what would need to go on there, and crisis prevention training, a lot on that, and what was being trained for, a lot of de-escalation training and all staff. And Barbie, of course, like Lori, her district is quite amazing, and it would be great if all districts were similar and saw special education as being as important in the training. Barbie also touched on HB 1952, and I didn't get a chance to look into that a whole lot. If Barbie would like to speak to that, she could, I guess. I don't want to put her on the spot.
No, I'm cool. I'm good with putting Barbie on the spot.
Hang on a second, guys. Let me get my notes.
Okay.
But it looks like, if I understand it correctly, while Barbie looks for her notes, the 1952 is the required training about restraint and discipline training for admin, and for restraint and seclusion. So here comes Barbie.
Okay. I think hi everybody. I think one of the things that we talked about as far as cameras are concerned, so I could jump back to that for just a second, is that I think that Agatha and Jen had questions about why we needed X number of days. And so we have to jump through a lot of hoops financially. We have to get bids. We have to, once a parent requests it, we have to get bids. We have to, and 3 bids from companies. That stuff has to be delivered. We have to run cable. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. A lot of times it's not safe to run cable with students in the classroom. So there's a lot to that. So I think some of the discussion came up about, well, couldn't they just automatically be there? Well, it doesn't happen that fast. And so I was just trying to explain that's why the state does give us a number of days in order to get that process going. Again, my district requires us to have at least 3 bids from companies. So in all of our new buildings, we're already running cable for that. In the event that it's requested, the cables are there. So all we have to do is get the other equipment, which is easier to acquire. I did talk a little bit about the storage requirements. It takes a lot of storage for video. And so we're having to buy separate devices or storage devices. I'm not a technology person, y'all. As far as hardware to store all that information to, again, having to go out for bids and doing all of that type of thing. I think one of the things that we talked about as far as House Bill 1952 with restraints and timeout and so forth, I think a lot of us have already updated our forms for restraint to include the behavior pieces that are required now. I know we've done that. We're a hands-off district. I know a lot of us are doing CPI and other trainings for our staff members. We're trying to focus on de-escalation for all of our staff. We're recommending that any staff members can attend our trainings. We're not just isolating it just for special educators or special education staff. Some of our general ed teachers have the training as well. And then with seclusion, I mean, that's kind of shocking to me. We don't typically have seclusion areas. We create sensory areas for students that need, that may need another place to. Sorry, I'm in a training, so I'm walking out. That may need another location in order to deal with any other overstimulation or sensory needs. That's what we've tried to do, is create sensory areas for students. And jokingly, we said sometimes staff members need to debrief, right? We need to be able to tap out, and if we're dealing with some difficult and challenging behaviors. And so we're kind of setting those up in our new early childhood center, to where there's areas where teachers can go to for collaboration and to debrief and so forth. So that's kind of our discussion that day.
Dang it. Thank you, Barbie. Truly, we appreciate that. Are there any questions, comments, concerns for the mental health subcommittee specific to the camera proposal? Hearing none. Unfortunately, the room that we are in right now is not equipped with a whiteboard, so notes are being taken by me and by Agatha the Fantastic, and we will compare them later and make sure that they match. Are there further questions, comments, recommendations for this subcommittee to consider as we prepare our report? Hearing none. Agatha, would you like to report on your other committees that have met?
Sorry. Actually, April is the one that has kind of been the leader of our committee. So I would pose that to her if she would like to update.
Outstanding. April, congratulations. You're on the hot seat. Look at that work.
Oh, well, thank you. So yeah, I think just that, so we've been trying to just meet a couple times, and then like you said, everyone's super busy. The big thing was, like Agatha mentioned, was just trying to be familiar with what the prior set of recommendations were, just so we could see like what things were still relevant, but really I've been doing just like a little research into, a lot of the concerns last time that we talked about was the training and certification for the paraprofessionals, for the teacher aides. So I've really been digging into just kind of the current requirements for teacher aides, how their certifications work, what those different levels are, because I just wanted to make sure that our recommendations don't recommend something that's already there, or that is inconsistent with the way the practice is, or if there's something that needs to be changed because of those. So we've really talked a little bit about just familiarizing ourselves with how paraprofessionals get recertified. It's a little different than teachers, where they don't get renewed. They actually apply for a brand new certification each time. So I know there were some things about making a recommendation where before they got renewed, they would have to show hours like teachers. So that's not the process for them now. So, and then we know that there's a lot of concerns with our districts of finding paraprofessionals right now because of the pay for them. And so kind of balancing that concern with increasing the requirements before they come in, instead trying to figure out good ways to get them prepped and trained upon hiring, like whether that's the new teacher week before school, or just and ongoing trainings and things. So we want to make sure that our teachers and paraprofessionals feel equipped, but also that school districts are able to still attract and retain these paraprofessionals, and make sure that they can continue to give them training based off of the classes and the students that they're serving, because it's definitely not a one size fits all. There's definitely some things we think would apply to all special ed paras. However, if you're in a life skills classroom, you might need a different set of training than if you're in a behavior classroom. And so just making sure there's and connecting them with the networks and other things that are out there, or to see what gaps do we have in our statewide training that don't exist. So just making sure that things that we put in place would be doable by our districts, but also be beneficial for our students.
Thank you, April. I think that once Ms. Cook is able to address us, that we should be able to have some very interesting conversations and questions for her that will clarify that. I look forward to her presentation. Anything further on certification at this time? Hearing nothing. Here's what I'd recommend at this time. I'd recommend a 7-minute break, which I know seems very specific, but there is purpose to that. Because Ms. Cook is going to be able to join us at 10:30, I think now would be an appropriate time to take a break, stretch your legs, get a cup of caffeine, and we will reconvene at 10:30 and look forward to hearing from Ms. Cook so that we can continue this conversation. Pull ourselves back. We're going to need 1 more minute because Aaron and Deanna have not come back in the room yet. So I do not believe, actually, nope, never mind. Here they are. Fantastic. We have quorum again, which my favorite words in the world, bar none. I believe I saw Miss Marilyn coming back in to join us. Am I correct in that statement?
I am here. Yes, ma'am.
Fantastic. We are so glad that you are able to join us here today. And it's not to, just immediately shoot you right out of the cannon. I know that you've had a busy morning, but yet here we are shooting you out of the cannon. Welcome to your report.
Thank you very, very much. It's a real honor, a pleasure to have an opportunity to meet with y'all. And I am covering 3 meetings today because one of my staff members that was going to be me in another location has fallen pretty ill. So I appreciate y'all indulging me and apologize that I had to hop off before. Wonderful Stephanie told me that you all maybe had some questions about SBEC's rules for the educational aid certificate. Yes. And specifically maybe some questions around whether or not those folks have to complete continuing professional education requirements. Yeah. So I wanted to confirm for you, they do not. There are no SBEC mandated continuing professional ed requirements for educational aid. We have them for the classroom teacher and other than classroom teacher areas. What I have heard anecdotally, there may be some employing districts who have additional requirements up front before they perhaps recommend an individual for educational aid. I've heard many districts use perhaps Parapro assessment and maybe some other requirements as a condition for them to recommend someone for the educational aid certificate. But in terms of renewal, one other point of clarification I think that may be helpful. For many, many, many years, educational aid certificates were renewed every 5 years. Even when that was in place though, there were no CPE hours required. We changed the SBEC rules in January of 2018 to move the 5-year educational aid certificate to a 2-year certificate, and we reduced that fee for $17. So what you will probably see if you're out and about and looking at an educator's credentials online, they may have previously had a 5-year certificate. At the point when it expires, and I think that we're almost going to go through probably by the end of this year and maybe very early into 2023, we will probably finally have expired out the last of the 5-year standard certificates for educational aid. And every one of those individuals moving forward has to get reissued certification every 2 years if they're interested in doing so. So each time Marilyn Cook's got an educational aid certificate, she's ready at the end of the 2-year period to get another one. If she's with her same employer, she has to reapply, pay the $17 fee online, and that employing district comes behind and provides the recommendation for the next 2-year validity period. When we changed the rules also, if midstream I was on an educational aid 1 certificate, and an example that we saw happen quite a bit during the times of the pandemic, educational aid stepped up, filled in a lot of gaps. A district may say, I want to acknowledge and recognize the efforts above and beyond of this particular educational aid and go ahead and recommend him or her for an educational aid 2 or 3 credential. There's nothing now in the rules that would prohibit a person from going ahead and be recommended for an advanced level of that educational aid certificate. So I don't know if that, I hope that helps somewhat and addresses the questions. I would say the other thing that may be important and helpful to remember in the SBEC rules right now for educational aid certificates, we issue the 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3. There are in SBEC rules suggestions. The district's the one that ultimately makes the assessment and the determination of what I want Marilyn Cook, for example, to demonstrate or have experience in for me to make the determination if I'm recommending her for a 1, 2, or 3 certificate. In our rules, there is for the educational aid 2 a recommendation of one of the things in there, perhaps 15 hours of coursework, some experience related to students, important things to know about student growth. For the educational aid 3, the highest level, there's a recommendation in there to consider 30 hours of coursework training specific in those areas. I know that this fine group is focused a lot on special ed. This is a little bit outside of my purview, but I know that my colleagues in educator preparation also work closely with a lot of districts sometimes. If you've got educational aides who've done a phenomenal job specific to supporting special education students, and a district sees the potential for that individual and wants to mentor perhaps him or her to consider moving into the teaching profession, there are provisions in place under the educator preparation rules to support and count some of that educational aid experience to move into the coursework to become certified, perhaps down the road if we're fortunate to get them as a special education teacher. So those were the updates that I knew y'all needed me to come on the mic and provide. I hope that that helps, and I'll be quiet for a minute. I told Stephanie I was excited about getting a chance to talk to y'all. Probably wouldn't take a breath, so I will close my big mouth now and see if anybody has any questions that I might be able to help with.
I've got a quick question. I'm a parent of a special needs child. Is alternative certification still out there for someone who does have a college degree, but not as a certified teacher?
Yes, ma'am. And I appreciate that question. I have the good fortune of working closely with several colleagues here in educator preparation. It is definitely still an option. Probably we have right now about 122, maybe about to be 123 approved educator preparation programs across the state. And alternative certification is very much alive and well. Special ed, of course, as you all know all too well, is a high needs area. So there's often a lot of interest in trying to recruit great folks to move into that particular role. So yes, ma'am, it is definitely an option.
Marilyn, this is April Estrada. I have a one question that we get quite a bit is is it required for every single paraprofessional to receive or apply for the teacher aid certificate?
It's a great question, April, and thank you for that. Our Chapter 231 assignment rules give an option. You may have someone who maybe has a classroom teacher certificate that could serve in the role. As a best practice, I will tell you, our office usually encourages districts just for, auditing purposes, transparency, have the individual apply for and be issued that educational aid certificate. But there is some flexibility in the Chapter 231 assignment rules that would allow someone who is already certified as a classroom teacher, if they, perhaps retired and came back or said, I want to try something different, it will give that flexibility. We try to encourage folks to go ahead and get the certificate, though, as a best practice. And so that there's no confusion or concern with folks who may be looking online to go, does that person have certification to be serving in that role?
Thank you so much. And that information today was so helpful.
Thank you.
Hi, Marilyn. This is Agatha. I had a question. When it comes to the paras getting recertified, do you guys keep numbers as far as how many new paras as opposed to how many are recertifying? And what is that looking like?
You know what? I knew someone, Agatha, you asked the magical question, the good question that Marilyn Cook should have done her homework in between being multiple people. I don't have the numbers handy, but I am very fortunate to work right next door here in this office. Dr. Mark Olofsson, he leads our educator data and research team. I'm gonna make a note, if y'all will indulge me, to ask about those numbers. And if it's okay with this fine group, I'll forward that information on to Stephanie to see what we can pull up for you all. But we definitely, because there is an application and because we can tie that usually to a TEA ID number or something, should be able to track and get some information. But I will ask about that and follow up if that sounds okay.
That would be wonderful. That would be so helpful for our subcommittee to have some information that we could go off of and look at and see if there's, just a trend, and especially post-COVID, what's happening with those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. This is Amy Lutzinger. So if paraprofessionals are recertifying and they know that they're going to be working with a specific student with specific needs, do they have certain things that they can add to their certification or their continuing ed to specifically address what they might need for certain students?
I think, Amy, that's an excellent question. We don't have anything in the SPEC rules, so to speak, to directly do that. I have no doubt probably that some districts who are employing folks in that educational aid role may have some additional requirements or ask those folks to participate in certain training so that they have the knowledge and skills and are equipped to do well. I'm gonna be at another presentation later this week. I think I have some, it's nice that I know so many people out in the world, so I can ask a couple of friends anecdotally as well, something along the lines of that question for what is your vetting process, or in particular, if you're employing folks for educational aids for special ed and to support those wonderful students, what are you looking for? What are you encouraging them to do and take?
Right, because I'm thinking about the large percentage of students that receive special ed services, but do so in a general ed classroom, so that educational aids may have to have some knowledge of both an advanced curriculum and the physical supports or other supports that their student might need. So they might need continuing ed out of both programs.
And I think you raised an excellent point and an important one. And so I'm probably gonna also use a little bit of my phone a friend access with my colleagues in educator preparation in terms of if they have any insight or a lens into maybe those educational aides who then transition into special ed prep programs, to see if they have any insight into what kind of background did that educational aid enter into the program with, and did they receive particular coursework or those things. I think it's a really good point and an important one for us to try to follow up on if there's some data available.
And I have
Thank you.
another question, and I'm not sure if you can answer, but in regards to substitute teaching, you know, we're all working in the post-pandemic world, a lot of shortage of teachers, you know, people still getting ill. Are there any restrictions or changes that you all are talking about when it comes to substitute teachers?
So I think that is an excellent question as well. We don't, like some of the other states where we see folks transferring into Texas from, their licensing boards issue an actual special ed credential, and we don't have that in Texas. The two things that we have, so to speak, in our certification rules, in the assignment rules, we state something in the first subchapter of the provisions, the general provisions, saying that certification rules and the assignment, the expectation that they have some content knowledge in what they're being assigned to teach also applies to substitute teachers. But the district at the local level has that responsibility to kind of vet candidates to go, here's our pool of individuals we want to serve in as substitute teachers. I will tell you also, I have the good fortune of being one of the TEA staff members. There's several of us that are also working actively right now with the Teacher Vacancy Task Force. And so that group also, the administrators, the actual educators who are on that task force, and the HR representatives all have spoken in the past 2 meetings about the importance of a process for substitute teachers to make sure, one, they're ready, especially in a post-pandemic time, but also ways to try to retain them and support them so they can keep that bandwidth, because everybody is struggling and has been through the pandemic to hold on to teachers, but then to make sure they have an adequate pool to support when you need to those vacancies in the classroom. So we don't have specific rules, so to speak, for substitute teaching, but we have guidance and best practices. I'm writing your question down because I know that we talked about that a little bit in the last Teacher Vacancy Task Force meeting. The next one is coming up on August the 25th. And again, Stephanie is wonderful to me, better than I deserve. If there was some conversation specific to that from the last Teacher Vacancy Task Force, I'll send her some links and things, because we have a website dedicated to that effort on the TEA page. And we've got the highlights of the last 2 meetings. I know that it has come up. I don't have it right committed to memory, everything that we said or what they asked TEA at the end of this process to kind of think about from a policy perspective to sort of support that process moving forward. But I appreciate y'all ask phenomenal questions. As Stephanie had already said, you're a great group always. So I just appreciate the opportunity to participate today.
Marilyn, you're marvelous. I love your energy. I do have a quick question, and having grown up in Illinois and transplanted, because I married a Texan, and you can take them out and not for long and not successfully. Why is it that Texas hasn't pursued having that certification, or making sure that that we have a certification for special education substitutes? That kind of seems like something that would be beneficial to the state. And I'm not well versed enough to form an opinion, so I'm hoping you can help inform my opinion on that.
Yeah, I do not have a good answer for you here with substitute. I think that for as long, and I've worked at the agency now, I've crossed my, just last month, I think my 30-year mark. So I tell everybody I started when I was 2, working at TEA, but so that's my story, I'm sticking with it. But I've been here a long time. I come from one whole side of my family are all teachers, and I got in trouble for being the one that was the first one to not actually finish up. But for years, they talked about from internally at the agency, sort of like leaving that sort of flexibility and discretion at the local level so that districts can better craft, if you will, the needs and try to specialize, if you will, for the student population. I will tell you one lens that has been a point of focus for each Teacher Vacancy Task Force meeting are those high needs areas. So each meeting we're folding in aspects of special ed, bilingual, ESL, and everything from What else could the agency be doing? How can we better partner with the districts in terms of staffing, in terms of recruiting more folks into the fold for teaching in those areas? And so you raise a point, and I'm going to bring it to the next meeting as well, about the aspect of substitute teaching. I have no doubt coming up this next legislative session, someone is probably going to have ideas, and I'll say encouragement, if you will. And there's likely going to be lots of legislation or ideas drafted around the whole concept of teachers and student needs. The little bit that we're seeing now, I have no doubt that's going to come up some more. But I'm going to take your question about substitute teaching and a credential back, because it would be a way, in some sense now, while you respect the local level, of trying to perhaps further streamline the process so that no matter what part of the state you're in, you have a guidance and some standards and an assurance, you know, that those qualifications were met. But no one has ever, it's the closest thing that I've seen is always in our assignment rules going, for a substitute teacher, make sure that if you have someone teaching kids math, they have some math content in the background, so that you don't slide Marilyn, who's not your best math person, into the classroom trying to make magic happen that she can't make happen.
I know there used to be a rule, and I don't know if it's still in place, that if you're going to have a long-term sub in a special ed classroom, you're required to notify your parents of such. I don't know if that's still a rule.
Let me see, I'm getting all excited getting to talk to y'all. I couldn't get my unmute button done fast enough. The parental notification provision still lives. So yes, ma'am, there's still that requirement in place. So it still lives in the education code. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any further questions for Marilyn? Well, Marilyn, please be advised that this committee is greatly appreciative of your information and your fantastic attitude. Consider this a standing invitation to come back and talk to us literally anytime.
I'm really grateful and humbled by the kind words and the warm reception. And I tell you, Stephanie and Justin, Brittany, all my TEA colleagues that I know you spend more quality time with are phenomenal. I'm privileged to get to work with them, and when anytime our paths get to cross, I'm fortunate for that. So I have my list of to-dos. I promise not to forget, and I will follow up with Stephanie. And I appreciate your attention and the great questions. And I hope all of y'all enjoy a great rest of your day.
It promises to be a well-dressed disaster. We can't wait to see what happens next.
All right, y'all take care. Thank you again.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Bye.
Well, committee, that was some fun. Let's circle back then to teacher cert subcommittee. Do we have anything that we wish to add or redefine? Having heard from Marilyn.
Well, if I understood her correctly, I don't know what the process would be, but I'd like for the whole pathway to kind of be lifted off the local level and have it move on to like the bigger decision makers. You know, I work in a corporate financial world, and that industry is very different post-pandemic. There are people leaving for better opportunities, pasture greener on the other side. I would imagine that in light of what's happened in Uvalde and behavior becoming a big problem in the classrooms, that, you know, there are going to be people / parents wanting their kids to have a better education with all full force support systems, that I just think that the legislature is going to need to be a little bit more creative and not be so black and white when it comes to paras or even teacher certifications. I think we live in a very different world now.
Yep, I would agree.
Sorry, I just can't get to my mute button. I have too many things on the desk. This is Agatha. You know, I thought that was really interesting, and I did not realize that task force, the teacher vacancy task force was a thing. So I'm going to look more into that. I pulled it up, and I'll send. I can send. Well, I'll put it in the minutes, and then that goes out to everyone, I believe, or I'll, maybe Stephanie can put that in. But one thing that we were talking about in our subcommittee that I'll just open up to the whole committee, because we might as well just get as much input on things as possible with the full committee, is that we were kind of talking that many of our teachers are almost ill-prepared from, maybe, I don't know if it would happen in the certification process or just in the college scheme of things. It's like, our teacher curriculum at the college level is based on, maybe having a classroom of 30 near neurotypical students. And unfortunately, that's not what our classrooms hold anymore. We have kids from, anywhere from life skills popping in and out throughout the day. We have kids with IEPs and 504s, and we really have special needs throughout the entire school at all times of the day. And I don't think that our teachers are necessarily prepared to step into a modern day classroom with a curriculum that doesn't, really pertain. I mean, not to say that, child, not to say that certain classes aren't important, but I mean, behavior is important. It's like our last report focused on wanting all adults that that come into contact with any of our kids be able to be at least prepared to handle special needs on some level. And I don't even see necessarily that happening with the regular gen ed teachers and then of course you throw on all the other things, staff shortages and paras and so it's really a big thing to tackle. But I just figured, we might as well just kind of open it up and talk about it, what people think, that way our subcommittee can figure out a direction.
I know. Hi, this is Cheryl Kubala. This is my first meeting, so I'm new here. But I have a background in early childhood education. And going through college, I had one course on special education, very end of my degree. And really all we talked about was Down syndrome and autism. And that was kind of it. And so, when I had this baby who's all of a sudden seizing and gets diagnosed with this rare genetic thing, and I'm like, this is not what I have no idea what to do. And so, yeah, now this was 20 years ago when I was in school. So it's been a little while, but I completely agree that still there is not, one class at the end of your degree is not going to prepare you for the diversity in population that we have now. And there's the huge spectrum of special education, anywhere from, I've got my middle child has dyslexia. She was just diagnosed with that. I have dyslexia as well, so it's not that surprising. But then, my older child has all of these other, diagnoses. And so, all students, have individual needs, and that includes within the special education community. So yeah, I agree that there's got to be some kind of, not necessarily inclusion, but inclusion of education for teachers and staff as far as understanding the different needs of students.
I totally agree. I kind of envision, it's no longer, yes, we need the teacher, but we need the teacher dedicating her time to the curriculum. But then our campuses have a counselor, but the counselor's really geared towards the general population, not all these areas of specialties like what we just heard, of the different diagnoses that the different students have. It's almost like we need like a task force within the local agencies, the task force made up of like neuropsychologists, things of that nature to support the different campuses within the district. And, I don't know whether that would come from special ed funding, but like I said, we live in a very different world now. It's not like what it was 20 years ago and 30 years ago, even when I was, an elementary student way back in the day. We've got to revamp it all. And I don't know, I guess it maybe starts at the college level. No more 3 and 6 hours of special education training. We need more. So, and that's going to involve paying our teachers a little more, because they are going to spend more time, in the undergrad level and the training and such.
Yeah, I think funding, as I hear these conversations, I think funding is a big part of it. Like, people aren't going to want to, this holds true right now, even like, I think that's why people are leaving the teaching career in droves, is because it's not worth the little that's paid, which I know is a whole other conversation, but.
I would say, just to add to that piece on just the general training, because what I think kind of you're saying about the expectations. So the majority of our students, over 70% of our students, spend the most of their time in a gen ed classroom. And so for many years, several teachers have thrown around if there could be some sort of proposal where general ed teachers, they already have that 30-hour minimum requirement for GT. They have to have an update and those minimum require of how to work with gifted and talented students. And so I know I've heard around for years, many people are wondering why there's not something like that for special education, where this would be for gen ed teachers, because I think, to everybody's point, we continue to put all this on the special ed teachers. And when we respond to high needs, it's because of a lack of understanding and toolkits of the rest of the campus. So not that our special ed teachers and aides don't need more and additional training, but we still need a minimum expectation and ongoing expectation for our gen ed teachers and administrators on how to work with our students.
Well, if I'm hearing the body correctly, and I'm pretty sure I am, might it be appropriate to propose to our teacher certification subcommittee that we put in and revamp a continuing education training to dive deeper into special education? I mean, we've all seen this. If we're truly becoming a more inclusive classroom where it is appropriate and welcomed that our special education students are part of the general education population, then it seems prudent to me that we recommend that. Stephanie is asking, would we like TEA staff in charge of Technical Assistance Inclusion Network to come and speak? Heck yes. Bring it, mama. You bet we do. Look at that. I just made a unilateral decision on behalf of the committee, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Yes, we would. Because to me, if we're going to make that recommendation, and I personally would like to see that recommendation made by this committee in the legislative report. How else, looking at it this way, friends, I am comfortably certain that our teachers want to teach the best classroom they can. And I don't mean that students are always shiny, happy, well-behaved, and they're Mary Poppins. I mean that they want to teach to the best of their ability. And it seems incumbent that we give them every opportunity to learn in the best way possible about all of their students. We've all had a favorite teacher who got us. Shouldn't we want that for the students of Texas? all students of Texas. Aaron's got something that I'm going to hand over the computer to him.
It sounds like, I know we've done some short-term, long-term kinds of stuff. I don't know if this is long-term, really long-term, but one thing we may want to do in addition to the continuing education recommendation is a recommendation related to the actual undergraduate curricula for training the teachers in the first place, which is, and you know, that can go in different ways, but the teachers coming out in the first place probably need to have some standard of training. So obviously any degree program is accredited. And so maybe we want to influence the accreditation criteria for, you know, primary and secondary teaching programs to better reflect the special education as a service, not as a place, not as in addition to being a specialized area, but that the teachers in the mainstream classrooms need to have some awareness. And I don't think that, just my own impression is that shouldn't take the form of trained teachers on every type of disability that's out there and all the different potential accommodations. Let's start with 504s and IEPs are specific to that. You need to be aware of what those are for the children in your classroom and follow them and be supportive of those sorts of things. Let's just start there. And then, you know, I think that would get at a large part of the issue, because at the end of the day, special education is individualized. It's not a one size fits all. So start with it is in the philosophy of it is individualized, but it's written out what you need to do in the IEP and the 504.
This is Agatha Thibodeau. Aaron, I agree with what you're saying, and that's what you know, we were talking about in our subcommittee is starting, you know, at that college level, what is coming out of school, because if we just put everything on to the, you know, individual schools and districts to teach the teachers once they get out of college everything that they need to know, they spend so much time in their training. Whereas if we were to put to the legislature to maybe modify that initial curriculum to where they're coming out with just a general ability to teach in the modern classroom, and then specialize from there in their individual district, or, you know, get training in their individual situation where they're at in the state, you know, but they're not coming out with, you know, they're coming out with education that gives them how to teach 30 neurotypicals and not what our modern classroom looks like.
This is Kimberly James Kelly. I'm a community member. It's my first meeting. I apologize if I'm not supposed to speak up or ask questions. I am wondering, to Aaron's point regarding individualization, is there a way to make that recommendation for continuing education and also the addition to the primary education specific enough to identify the kinds of additional courses? So not just that you took a course, but is it in something that's relevant and going to give these teachers the toolkit and the tools that they need to be successful to determine if their teaching practices are effective for the individual students in their classroom, and how to monitor those data over time so that they can share them with the family and really not just fulfill the procedural requirements of IDEA, but also embrace the heart of it and meet the substantive requirements of showing the effectiveness over time.
Kimberly, I appreciate you being a part of our committee today. Unfortunately, public members are not able to address the committee outside of public comment.
Okay.
But we will certainly take that under advisement.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
Friends, do we have anything else specific to the teacher certification subcommittee? I think we've got some great ideas for us to put in our minutes to reflect this discussion and to add to our potential legislative recommendations for the committee report. If we have nothing further on that one at this particular time, Aaron had notified me that he'd like to speak briefly on accessibility, even though that the committee has not met. Aaron?
Thanks, Jen. And Amy and I are the subcommittee, and by we haven't met, that means I haven't reached out to Amy yet about it. I was really hoping to have the Digital Curriculum Advisory Committee report available. Want to make sure that any recommendations that come out of our committee are as evidence informed as possible. And I think that will be a treasure trove of information and data that will help inform not only the direction, but the substance of the recommendations. So guess we got about another month wait to get that. And then I think that will allow us to really dive in and formulate. There were a couple other things that I anticipate recommendations around that I just want to at least put out in front of the committee as a whole before the subcommittee kind of dives deeper into that. One is around procurement. Certainly, there are many requirements around procurement of accessible technology at the federal level, at the state level. States got TAC 206, 213. I don't believe and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if Brittany's still around, but I don't believe local education agencies have the obligation to follow TAC 206 and 213, but they're certainly available to use. They're out there and anybody can adopt them as guidance. No need to reinvent the wheel. But is there policy at the LEA level to evaluate accessibility, or at least to put it into contractual language with potential vendors providing content and technology to the LEA? There's lots of good resources out there that are made available to organizations on how does one go about putting things into contracts or in procurement requirements, RFIs, RFPs, those sorts of things. So I don't know that we need a lot of data to be able to point as a recommendation to point to those existing resources for LEAs to leverage. Another one is, and I'm pretty sure the Digital Curriculum Advisory Committee report will probably get into this, which is, teachers and paraprofessionals are probably not assistive technology experts or experts on creating accessible technology. So how do we put a framework around them to support them to, they're smart people, but not necessarily knowledgeable in this area. What can we do to not just provide them training and expect them to be experts in assistive and accessible technology, but to give them cheat sheets and guidelines and other things to just be aware of. So, hey, if you want to put a video in the classroom, make sure it has captioning, and no, auto captioning on YouTube doesn't count, that sort of thing. Just having that as a cheat sheet, go like, oh, I want to do video. These are the things I should be checking out. Don't have a video that's has, for somebody who's blind, has no audio track that provides any information whatsoever, or at least be able to provide that in some sort of alternate format. So I think those are available that are out there. There's great resources on how to do these things. There is a whole series of videos on how to make Microsoft Office documents accessible that a consortium of state agencies created a few years ago. So, just sit down and, how do I use the accessibility checker in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint and those sorts of things. You know, a lot of teachers probably don't know what they don't know, but if they have a kind of handy reference that can be introduced in a training to get them going, but when it's 6 months later, or 6 years later, and they're going like, I don't remember what I'm supposed to do, I'm a little fuzzy on the training, that there's a document or other type of resource, video resource, for instance, to help them. And then the last thing I want to bring up, when I was searching around accessible technology and TEA, and Stephanie, this maybe is probably a question for you. I found a long-range plan for technology 2018 to 2023. It does allude to equity, but unless you are an accessibility expert and squint really hard, there's really nothing about accessibility and support for students with disabilities in that plan. I've given 2024 is a year and a half away at this point. Presumably, we are, as TEA is planning to put together a group to update that long-range plan. I'm assuming that's happening fairly soon. I think we should provide some recommendations and guidance around being more explicit about assistive and accessible technology in any of that long-range plan. And there's a companion site on TEA's website about technology planning. All it really references is connectivity and the E-rate program, which is basically connectivity. There's nothing really there about accessible technology. That doesn't mean there's nothing about accessible technology on TEA's website, but if you're coming in with a technology perspective, there doesn't seem to be an obvious way to encounter anything about guidance around assistive and accessible technology from there. So depending on what resources may already be available, we might want to put a recommendation around trying to connect some dots there. So that's kind of where I'm broadly at with that. Amy, I don't know if you have any thoughts that you want to add on top of that. Stephanie, do you know anything about the long-range plan for technology? When it's obviously it's listed as being through 2023, so that's the one that's in effect. But do you have any knowledge about how that a process around what might go into updating that? Who may be a part of that? How a special education lens may be applied to that process?
I think that Justin is probably the one to speak to that better than I am. So if that's something you would like him to touch on, you guys can certainly ask him. Okay.
Do you need an email with that particular question for him, or could you drop that to him and you can forward on whatever reply he has to us as a committee?
Well, typically what we'll do is in the minutes that might be included of this, the CAC would like some information about that, and I'll pick it up from there.
Okay, perfect. All right, unless Amy has anything, that's I think it for our subcommittee.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you, Erin. We appreciate that. Are there any further recommendations, additions, thought process on any aspect of the report thus far?
Jen, just so I'm updating the minutes for the request for information. Erin, do you mind just saying that one more time, or Stephanie, who we're requesting information from?
Aaron says he's going to put it in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Aaron.
With that, and while Aaron's doing that, what further pressing concerns do we have to start fleshing out for the report?
Well, I mean, this is Agatha. I'm just kind of, since we have the time and we have plenty of time to discuss and update, we've kind of gone through, and Erin was able to give us a good update on the digital literacy aspect. I mean, we talked about the staff qualifications and, we've got the funding. I mean, if there's anything that anyone from that subcommittee wants to just pose to the group, and we can just, we get so much information just from all speaking to each other. We've still got transition planning and then mental health and behavior. We can talk about any of those things and just kind of start getting some information from everyone.
100%.
I'll talk a little bit about funding. Our group has not met, and I think Amy's part of that. I'm not sure if she dropped off. And I'm gonna have to drop off, but then come back so that we maintain our quorum. But something that kind of puzzled me, and I guess it didn't, I didn't really fully process until Mr. Porter was done with his talk, but he mentioned, Florida as a model, right? And talked about how they're trying to kind of digitize, for lack of better words. And the response that he has gotten within our state is, oh, well, that's all we need, more paperwork. Well, I'm sorry, but, I think there needs to be a check and balance when it comes to funding. And correct me if I misunderstood what he presented, but it's now clicking to me like, I mean, every industry, whether it be education or my industry, the finance world, there's a check and balance. And in the finance world, the check and balance is internal audit, external examiners. I'm not seeing that in the education agency. So what is wrong with, enhancing what we have? I mean, I know that everybody is bogged down in paperwork, but this is multi-millions of dollars entering the state. And so there has to be a check and balance. So, things that kind of come to mind, just being a finance person, is, maybe the school district needs to have an internal audit program. Because obviously we want the flow of income and the monies to continue to be there to support, but it's nice to have that money, but are you being productive? Are your students advancing? Are you meeting IEP goals, et cetera? So I'm just kind of all over the place, but that's kind of my thought. I know that every school district, has a finance person that presents figures, but it's kind of a general presentation. The only thing the public would see would be standardized results, right? But how do you further tie that into continuing to receive that money when your standardized results, as far as standardized testings, are low? So I'm trying to kind of come up in my brain, like, what does that look like? What can it look like that's fair to everybody? But it almost seems like it needs to be within the campuses that have identified students. Are they mastering their IEPs? That, to me, that's my check and balance right there. So I don't see anything wrong with modeling a state if it's working for that state and they're showing success. I don't think that more paperwork and just turning away from that because nobody wants to add more paperwork that's not acceptable to me.
thinking about kind of that conversation too, Joanne. I think the way that I interpret that it's good to always hear, because it's funny how we hear things and we all process it differently. So I think it's great to be able to communicate about this. But what I heard him saying was that the Florida program, the ARD sat there and had to calculate funding after the meeting, and that they're trying to balance that with school districts having time to add more time to those ARD committee meetings. I wasn't necessarily hearing it as not having any, time to do more audit. We do have several audits in our school districts. There's an internal audit that's required each year by school districts. TEA does audits on our IDEA with our school district. So there are several things in place to make sure there's checks and balances for how districts are spending. I don't know as it goes as expensive, where we see things more like checking progress on IEPs are things through our review and support. That's who the team that's really doing the deep dive into programming and consistency and things like that. So I think that when I was hearing that, it was more of, is the ARD committee need to be the one that sits there and processes paperwork on funding, or if there needs to be other things that could be done so that the ARD committee wasn't more, because that's not just a special, that's the teachers and the principals, and we're getting a lot of feedback from not being able to keep them covered for, and some of them go and should go, hours long, and if that should be the place for that, or if it needs to go somewhere else. So I appreciate you sharing what you heard too, because that makes me wonder.
Yeah, and on top of that, kind of what I heard as well is that, taking the model of Florida and taking the part that's not working well and trying to revamp that part so that hopefully our model would just work better. So it's not necessarily their exact model, but it's similar and it's the same concept, but maybe the things are already in place in the IEPs and at those ARD meetings to where we can somehow, this isn't up to us to decide, to figure out, obviously, but maybe they can figure out a way to use what's already there and what is already being done, because they are required to do a lot of paperwork already. And maybe we can use that paperwork that we have to somehow calculate funding.
This is Agatha Thibodeau. Well, talking about, the funding piece, what you guys were talking about with funding, and then, what Aaron was talking about, with the assistive technology and things like that. I mean, we are putting, and it wraps into all of it, teacher qualifications, all of that. Someone had mentioned, maybe there being some sort of task force or something, but if we were able to maybe, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, so but we need assistive technology, we need people that are experts in it. We can't expect every one of our teachers or paras to be an expert, but if we had maybe a team of people, I probably wouldn't work from a district level because they would just be having to move around too much. But even internally, someone that, you can say, hey, I've got this kiddo in my class and I need this to work. Can you, set things up? I mean, it would call for things to have to go to this group, much earlier on, and there would be a lot of pre-planning and things like that. But, that might be something that would be worth funding. Because, it's like, how do we, cram more into teachers' time? I mean, the IEP meetings, the 504 meetings, the planning that they have for their students, the time to take down data and all sorts of things. It really takes away from the time that they're not in the classroom actually working with the kids, and then it puts more pressure on the paras who are unqualified to be working with the students, and and it just, everything dominoes. So maybe something with the funding that can kind of incorporate a lot of that is that we get these teams that kind of handle some of that for us. They still need instruction from the teachers and the paras and things like that. because like Amy was saying, there's a lot of paras that, you know, sometimes for me personally, because of where my son is, having autism, you know, he was always in a life skill setting. So, you know, I kind of thought of special education being that, but it's not. It's much more broad. It's much broader. I mean, you've got, you know, special education students with IEPs and 504s in gifted and talented classes and AP classes and things like that. And sometimes their paras, you know, aren't educated to the point to the level that they need. So, you know, maybe having some of, you know, again, back to the like a digital task force team, or I don't know what it would exactly be, but I'm just kind of opening the discussion that, you know, maybe we look at funding something like that, that the LEAs can have, you know, a group of people that, you know, the teachers are able to give these things to and say, hey, I've got this thing and I need it to work for a deaf student, a blind student, and, you know, this sort of modified curriculum. And, you know, the team goes, okay, you know, we've got this. When do you need it by, you know? So.
I like the task force idea more and more. I really do. I'm just thinking you know, we need to modernize our education. It's not the same anymore like when we all grew up. I think we really, I mean, you envision like a general family practitioner. He doesn't have the answers to the heart questions, to the, you know, neurology questions, the GI questions. We all have specialists. So I just kind of envision that, and you know, that we just need a task force within a moving, traveling task force within our districts, and that they're not sitting in an administrative building all day. They're moving amongst the campuses, checking in. What do you need? You know, maybe even checking the IEP data, something like that. Maybe creating a degree plan that's, you know, you got a degree plan for someone who wants to be a teacher, you got a degree plan for someone who wants to be a special ed teacher, but then you have this other degree plan for a member of a task force that has all this knowledge.
Yeah, I would just, this is Aaron, I would just probably also couch it as, let's not necessarily specify the model so much as what the resource is. It's one thing for large school districts to have a team that can move around from campus to campus. It's another thing for, you know, the rural and small districts who may not have the resources at all to have the people, much less be able to have that person move around and those sorts of things. So we may want to specify, you know, certainly leveraging virtual technology to be able to get out and around. And maybe there's a part of this is a state resource that can provide specialized knowledge where, you know, a dozen districts in West Texas can't even have one person dedicated to doing this, and, you know, other duties as assigned is probably not going to work. But, you know, bringing in somebody from remotely using technology, assuming the connectivity is there, you know, that will allow that to do it. So yeah, in a large school district, there may be a small team that moves around, and small districts, maybe it's a resource they leverage from the state.
We've got another in-person committee member who wants to talk for a minute.
Okay, really briefly. Excuse me, my allergies are really bad today, but I've been in education for 40 plus years. And while task forces are good, I understand that. Most districts do have committees, like even in small districts that I worked in many, many, many years ago, and I'm talking 25 years ago, we had an assistive technology evaluation committee. And so teachers could refer a student for further evaluation. And they didn't even have to be a special education eligible student. They could be a general ed kid that needed just a little bit more help. We did have committees for behavior. And so we had a committee that if you had a behavior you needed support with in the classroom, a teacher needed support, and then a team would go in there and evaluate, do the checklist, figure out what needed to be done, antecedents and so forth, follow-up behavior. So, as far as what we maybe should consider as strategies is posing those questions of, do you have this? Do you have that? If you don't have this, then you might want to consider that. But most districts have what they need to be successful. And so I would prefer to couch something in that way to say, most districts do have that. They may not name it as such, but support for the student is there. I've always experienced that. And like I said, I started teaching in 1974, and that has been something that teachers get in the field because they want to help. And if they need help, then they reach out for it. And there is already statute where a teacher can ask for help, additional training to support her classroom. So those things are in place already. And so that's just a comment I wanted to make about school districts and about teachers and support that's out there. And if they really need some help, there are folks they can go to. Thanks.
Thank you, Deanna. And then what I'm hearing, and I'd like to propose as a recommendation for the spending subcommittee, is greater resources for programs that currently exist. And let's also put in there making sure that there's funding available for TEA to better study how the modern classroom needs to look, and using Florida as an example, using other states as examples, better utilizing the research and the case studies that are currently available. It's not like we're trying to reinvent the wheel, but we are trying to make sure that the wheel gets funded correctly and to best utilize best practices.
Yeah, I agree. And I won't say where my district is, and my student is has graduated, and I'm not trying to throw our district under the bus, but in my early years of struggling, when he was younger, it was always like, there's not enough money. It was always that excuse. There's no funding, there's not enough money. And oftentimes monies set aside for special ed was creatively, utilized for other areas. And so I'm a little bitter about that. And that's why I kind of raised my hand when it came to the funding committee, because I went through a lot of that. And I think that there needs to be, we need to kind of be a little stricter when it comes to the audit programs that we have in place. And there needs to be, more checks and balances. And I'll put further thought to that, just kind of utilizing my finance brain as it relates to special ed. But anyway, that's where I am. I'm going to have to excuse myself. I'm going to keep it on mute, and just so I can take this call, and then I'll regroup. Okay.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you.
So we've spent a fair chunk with spending, as we should. Agatha, would you mind recapping, since I know you're taking notes for minutes? What have we got currently in the spending subcommittee notes and recommendations, and let's see how we can go about streamlining some of that.
Well, things that we had, that the subcommittee was, I'm sorry, okay, so under the subcommittee, we had checks and balances, instructional arrangement, and under that, funding should not depend on setting, more funding going to the LRE, least restrictive environment, and staff resources instead of placement. And then they
Okay.
had staff shortages. So,
Okay. Okay, I like that list. That is a good list.
it is.
That is a very surprisingly concise for folks that are brainstorming along. I like that very much. I think those are some very strong recommendations. Aaron, I'd like to revisit quickly what we were talking about for the digital subcommittee that I know I am butchering the name of. Is there a possibility, thumbs up, thumbs down, that we could, when you get that report or when that report becomes available, can you email that to Stephanie so that she can get it out to the committee? I'm getting a thumbs up, so that we as a committee can be better informed on that as going forward and in preparation of our next meeting. Agatha, do you think it would be appropriate to give another quick update on mental and behavioral health? Can you review those recommendations again for the committee?
Sure. As far as mental health and behavioral health and wellness of staff and students, we have restraint and seclusion, cameras in the classroom, and staff and student well-being post-pandemic. That last one, we hadn't really, because we only had a certain allotted time that we were all able to meet in that subcommittee. And so we mostly focused on the restraint and seclusion and cameras in the classroom aspect. So we hadn't really talked much about the staff and student well-being post-pandemic. So if that's something that you would like to put to the committee.
Let's go ahead and let's put some meat on those bones. I think that everyone can agree that living through a once in 100-year pandemic has laid bare a variety of things. And most especially the strain that has had on our teachers, on our staff, and on our students. And along with that, parents. In all seriousness and much joking aside, I think we can all agree that while virtual learning was necessary, especially in a medically fragile population, it was certainly a painful way of doing an education seminar, especially with a population that might not have the longest of attention spans, or at least that was certainly the case in the House of Stratton. And we all breathed a sigh of relief, I think, when it came to coming back in person into an environment where community could happen. I think that it would be incredibly appropriate for this committee to make recommendations thusly to ensure that our students and our staff know what is available to them from a mental health perspective, specifically looking at our school counselors. What an unsung group of heroes they are, even in the best of circumstances. I think that it would be appropriate, one, for our committee to congratulate them for being the rock stars that they are, but also ensuring that from a legislative perspective, we're making certain that that counselors in particular are receiving the resources that they require, not simply from a monetary perspective, but let's face it, there are a number of school counselors who, especially at the high school level, talk more about college preparedness and future preparedness than they do checking in with the mental health of their students. I think it'd be appropriate for us to consider what that might look like from a legislative recommendation. And how do we recommend that our staff, and in particular counselors, have what they need to make sure that our students and our staff have the best possible learning environment? I don't pretend to have the answers on that one. And in fact, would welcome the committee's thoughts on that, because all I know is I am about to have 2 kids at the high school level, one in special education, one neurotip, and both of them struggled in different ways during virtual learning. And both of them lost quite a bit, especially in social skills and their ability to interact in person. We all see that that's a problem. How do we go about fixing it or making recommendations to lessen the blow?
It is, I think it's so specific to schools too, right? I mean, I know at least I heard so many different stories of how online learning went. My special ed student actually did amazing with online learning, and he's got social anxiety and pretty severe ADHD. So you take away all the other students, and he gained 2 years of learning in 1 year time frame. And so, I mean, that piece of it was great for him. But then with my other kiddo, woo, it's like pulling teeth. It was brutal. And so, I mean, I think everybody has their different stories of how it went, but many of them are similar in that everybody struggled in one way or another. And as I think almost everybody struggled socially. Like, you put everybody in isolation, and that's what happens, right? We as humans are social creatures. We're supposed to interact with other people. Like, that's how we're made. And so my special ed kid is still struggling socially as well. And so I don't know how we go about putting that into practice, though, when it comes to, other than realizing that social emotional skills and social emotional learning is a huge part of school, even though it's usually not something that's focused on.
Well, is that then maybe a recommendation that we want to make, is placing a different focus on social emotional learning? I know that many districts are studying this right now, and that's certainly an area that has a lot of people talking. It's a hot button conversation topic to engage that. Do we want, as a committee, to recommend a greater focus on social emotional learning, and dare I even say a trauma-informed learning style, where we take into account that not everyone had a pleasant educational experience and over the last 2 years, and our teachers and our students are all feeling that.
Yes, personally, I think that's important.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
What? So I wrote it down, placing a different focus on the social emotional learning and a trauma informed learning style. What does that mean? I mean, yeah.
At bottom is there's a variety of studies out there delving into the psychology of how trauma informs a learning style, how our social emotional impacts of, best example I can give is, say a kid had a death of a loved one, comes to school the next morning shaken. And if a teacher is unaware or unable to recognize the signs in their student that, hey, something just seems off. And I guess at that point, it's programming, continuing education. I know many school districts are focusing on the social emotional learning aspect and are doing continuing ed to that. I think that that would fall both under mental and behavioral health and also funding to make sure that districts across the board are able to provide that for their staff. Obviously, we have larger school districts that have no problem whatever making sure that that is part of the continuing ed. We also have smaller districts where that might not be the focus. And I think that comes across in a variety of ways, also in teacher cert, making sure that we're able to take a look at that as well. I have no idea if I just answered your question.
I was going to say tier two, maybe on the mental and behavioral health, since this is such a large component, it's paired very closely with school safety. So much of it is a layer that's not special ed. And I think that's something I always hear from special ed teachers is like everyone thinks that all mental health problems, all behavioral problems in the entire school belong to special ed. And so there's a component of what parts, like you're saying, Jen, are just like general, like needs to be adapted through general rules and just for all campuses and districts and all staff. But then like for our committee, do we need to look at things that are specific to special ed students, like things as far as in an ARD committee, do we need to make recommendations that we are adding a component where we're asking questions or addressing the social, emotional, or mental health needs of the students? Is there something that we're missing in that gap from, we had a legislation that had us check and see what compensatory services might be missing, but is there a component now in looking at sort of the trauma that has impacted our special ed students, or how we're serving even the ones who have had mental and behavioral health concerns in the past? Are there pieces of that we need to look at differently? And, are there additional staff or experts that districts need to be funded to provide so that they can meet these ever-growing needs of the special ed students? But I was just wondering what part we could spin it where I know there's a ton of initiatives at TEA right now on just global mental health and school safety, but how can we make sure our special ed students are getting that extra attention and support where it's needed as well?
April, thank you for being able to articulate where I was trying to get to. Because Lord knows I was tripping over myself right over there. I truly like your comment about the ARD questions, because yes, that is how we make that incredibly specific. And what better way to have that conversation between parent, staff, student than in the ARD when it's all written down. And being a federally protected document, let's make sure that, because I absolutely, in mental and behavioral health is certainly not unique to the special education population. But having said that, some of the supports that are needed are unique to the special education population. I'd like to make a recommendation for the legislative report that we put language in to broaden questions in the ARD to ensure that social emotional health is discussed. Because I know from my lived experience, when I tried to make my ARDs as fun for everyone as I could. And I know that ARDs are stressful for both parents and staff. But as long as we can remember that we're all part of the same team and we all want the same goal, overarching, which is student success. And I would have conversations with my daughter's staff to talk about, we used to joke it was the morning shift report of, I would report in on how her evening went, whether or not she slept well. And we would jokingly call it the pepper report, because I would joke that Maddie was anywhere from a green bell pepper to a ghost pepper, and somewhere on that spectrum depended on her mood. And it was enormously helpful for her staff to know what they were walking into in the morning, and they would let me know in the afternoon what was coming off the bus. And sometimes in between the bus ride home and Maddie getting off the bus depended greatly on how that mood improved or did not. But if we can put in an ARD where we have that conversation, where parents, student, and staff are all on the same page for what the expectations are, what our hopes are, and how we get the optimum education experience, I think would be invaluable. And I just used a lot of words to say that I agree with April. This is what happens when you let speechwriters run a meeting. Agatha, outside of my Oscar-winning speech there, did you get all that?
I think I did. I pretty much am going to have the notes reflect that the recommendation be, and luckily this is a subcommittee that you and Jen and I are all on, but I'm going to put it in the notes to reflect that we want to kind of make a recommendation to broaden the questions in the ARD that address social emotional / trauma be discussed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And I think just with that, and hopefully it'll come, and hopefully we'll see some of these other legislations and these kind of pair and marry nicely, is when they answer that question, then there needs to be some additional resources provided to schools to serve those needs. And I'm sure some of that's coming, and I really hope to see some of that coming where there's a little bit more qualified, not qualified, by that's more qualified, like more of them qualified people available on districts. Because we all know our school counselors are doing everything they possibly can, and our school psychologists are becoming few and far between, and are just working more hours in a day than there are. Is there a way that we could get more mental health, or at least some mental health additional staff on our campuses, so that when we do identify that, yes, we do have some concerns, that the districts not then just added one more thing with the current staff that they have.
April,
Exactly.
I have a quick question for you, and this might not be something that you can answer or not, but in reference to to this and bringing in, is it something that we already have data on? And I mean, it's like, what comes first? Do we need to start asking these questions and show that there's a need before we get it? Or before we get like people on campus to help with it? Or do we already have allotments for it and they just need to be used differently, and these questions would help specify?
So allotments for what are you thinking?
I'm sorry, the allotment for like the social emotional trauma, like the counselors. Did I state that clearly?
Are you asking, is there already like funding and positions available for this type of?
Yes, is it something that, because the recommendation is that we broaden the questions in the ARD meeting in which social emotional trauma would be discussed. And you were kind of piggybacking on that, saying that, and then we would have resources that would be able to address that. And so do we need it to start happening in the ARDs in order to get the resources? Or are resources already there and we just would use them differently?
I think it really depends on the district across the state, because we have some districts that have very robust mental health frameworks and a plethora of supports for all students, not gen ed and special ed students. What we see now, typically when our students have a behavioral health, because obviously we have a path to already handle emotional and behavioral health through like an emotional disturbance. There's counseling that we offer through school psychologists. There's counseling that we offer through special ed counselors or gen ed counselors. So there's already some people in place. What we hear now or more of are the capacity in which, so if our school psychologists are very overloaded with their load, our school counselors don't all have a licensed counselor. They're doing school counseling things. So some of our districts have hired mental health counselors. So I think there are some out there, but that maybe some sort of level of, I know in our small and rurals, it's really hard for them to have a mental health specialist available. And I know we've tried some things. There's a lot of things out there like T-Chat and these different virtual counseling type things. But as far as a mental health professional being readily available to meet with a kid that's in crisis, who is suicidal, who's self-harming, those sort of things, they start to, there doesn't seem to be enough positions, resources available right now to meet those needs.
Thank you. So since I'm still off mute, okay, so I do like the recommendation to kind of broaden the questions in the ARD meeting, and that will address, what is happening with the student. The other half of it is staff. Do we want to kind of open it up and see if there's anything that would apply for staff? I know that, Barbie, when we were in our last meeting, Barbie was talking about, there being, certain tag out and tap out procedures or, availability. But, one of the things that's kind of plaguing a lot of our schools now is shortages. So what do we do, if anything, if for the classroom that, is understaffed and doesn't have that ability? And how do we, do we want to make any sort of a recommendation for our staff?
100%, I think so. And I think that it would be an equal part ensuring, to walk down a rabbit trail with me for a moment, like, ladies and gentlemen. It seems to me that if a classroom is in crisis, if a teacher is overwhelmed, if they need, as Barbie brilliantly put it, a timeout, a tap out to go and collect themselves, but there simply is not staff available within that classroom, then that to me speaks to the teacher training that we've already talked about making sure that our, more specifically, gen ed teacher population is cross-trained in special education, or at least cross-trained in different behavioral areas where, if we're going for the least restrictive environment, which I think everyone can agree socially and psychologically is a best practice, then it seems to me that this is more a funding and training issue than anything more specific to that. It's simply making sure that our teachers and our staff know that they have resources available to them, both in the form of other people and in the form of resources to, how do we best take care of? How do we make our incredible teachers and staff understand that they are supported? And that, to me, speaks to a funding issue to make sure that those resources are available, or that those trainings are available. Does that make literally any sense?
Yes, absolutely. It makes sense. I know I have worked with my kids' teachers very closely. They've been at the same school since all three of my kids are at the same school. We've only had this one school the entire educational career so far. And so we've known them quite well. And I think I have a lot of friends who are teachers as well. And I think that type of thing is not known at all, that there is some kind of resource for them. Like, that's just it's not a thing. And so if we could help push that into existence, I think it would be tremendously helpful, especially in the light of Uvalde and everything that has happened in our state.
So what I'm hearing from you, Cheryl, if I'm understanding you correctly, is we're not just looking at funding, we're not just looking at staff resources, we're also looking at information and recommending that there is some form of, marketing isn't the right word, but a spread of information to our teachers, to our staff, of an up-to-date list of resources that are available to them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And that should be easy enough for the powers that be in the legislature to make certain that it is available to our school districts through TEA. I am comfortably certain that TEA is a wealth of information on how best to support our teachers and our staff.
Is that something, is there someone, I guess maybe this would be a question for Stephanie. Is there someone that we want to have come speak to us from some sort of resource of TEA that has information on what they do for teachers in burnout or
burnout? There's an option. I mean, there is some practices around trauma-informed best practices that are currently available, and certainly we can have somebody come and speak. There are two separate works. One is focuses on general ed, and then we've got the special ed side. So we could get the person that's in charge of that to come over and give you a rundown on mental and behavioral health and what's currently available in the state, if that's what you would like.
I think that'd be a marvelous thing to have us. If we're gonna make a recommendation, let's make sure that we're not either one, reinventing the wheel, or saying something that's so outlandish that everybody's gonna look at us like we're the ones here who've lost our minds.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. At this time, as much as I hate to interrupt the flow of the meeting, I need to call a 5-minute break. And we will reconvene at 12:15. So where we left off was speaking about the financial resources and staff resources that would be available for mental and behavioral health. If my memory is correct, in the last 10 minutes, we agreed that we wanted Stephanie to reach out for TEA staff to give us a report at our next meeting, discussing what best practices are being implemented and what resources are available so that we can better inform our recommendation. So we've spoken extensively about funding. We have spoken about our digital resources. We've spoken about teacher certification and para certification. We've spoken about mental and behavioral health. We've touched briefly, if my memory is correct, on suppression. Am I right, Agatha, on that one? Or
On suppression?
yeah, or not so. In our subcommittee, best practices for tapping out and things of that nature, and making sure that our staff and our students know what is available, that we're certainly not suggesting isolation, but a separate space that is accessible for sensory processing, that is not, shall we say, detrimental to the calming down process.
Yes, and certainly doesn't add trauma
Exactly.
to the school day.
Yes, exactly. What am I missing?
Well, you know what? It might be a good time to take a look at the minutes and make sure that, just kind of a preliminary approving, but take a look and make sure that I've captured everything.
Everything, since I don't have a whiteboard, which.
Yeah. So
next time, for the next meeting, I'm going to bring some form of whiteboard, or request one for, get here early enough where I can request one for the room. Stephanie, if you could make sure that I remember to do that, because bless my heart, and I mean that in the most sarcastic Texan way possible. Aaron's over here losing his mind because I was funny. I did not give that a thought, and I apologize, committee. I promise to do better next time. But if all I forget is a whiteboard, then dude, I'm doing okay. Yeah, in marbles, Nerf gun, water bottle, all of that. Agatha, if you want to go ahead and share your screen so that we can take a look and make sure that we're having some fun here and liking what we see.
Yes. Just a second, figure out. That's not it. Yeah, get just a second. Gosh, I should have gotten this ready while we were on break.
You are fine, truly.
Share screen. Okay, this should be it. Can you guys see that?
I can.
Okay, So the things I have highlighted are just, as far as attendees, I think the only people, no, Barbie came.
Barbie's here.
So I'll adjust. So I don't think Susan came and I don't think Shamika made it.
Susan did not, Shamika did not. You are
Okay.
correct.
So I will pull those names and put them into absentee and get rid of these here. As far as the TA, Justin, Stephanie, Jerry, Marilyn, Brittany, and Susan.
Yes.
Okay. Opened up. Quick synopsis of Justin's. He talked about SB 89, the corrective action plan. There's the link to the funding. So. I just kind of tried to capture the gist of what everyone spoke to. I'm going to move down to what pertains, not public comment. And then, okay, so I just left in everything from our last meeting as far as the subcommittees go. But do I need to add anything in to any of these? The funding.
Agatha, this is Amy. Can I just add on the assistive technology part that we make sure that because of funding and training for teachers and staff being limited, that we want to make sure that the brunt of knowing their own assistive technology isn't placed on the student, because we don't have funding or staff to be able to make sure that students aren't held responsible for their own technology as far as knowing how it works.
Okay. So basically you just want to make sure that the language in the report reflects that we make it a point that assistive technology doesn't fall on the student.
Yeah, the responsibility for maintenance or being well trained on it doesn't end up falling on the student or the ARD committee in general. That's not an ARD committee responsibility to make sure that the student know that, so that the parent and the student aren't being held responsible for learning it by themselves. Because I can see in a more digital learning environment, especially if we're not in person, that could fall to the student or the parent, because it already was happening, 10 years ago when I was a student. So.
Okay. And that's just a reminder for the subcommittee to include that. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
And I'm on that subcommittee, so I'm just.
So it's like note to self.
Yeah. Well, note to everybody that when we meet, we should think about that.
Okay. Did we talk about transition planning as far as anything that I needed to add?
I don't think we've discussed that.
Okay. So, all right, I'm just going to leave that for now. And then under the mental health, to broaden the questions in the ARD meeting, to include, trauma and social, emotional, and trauma to be discussed. And then we talked about an informational campaign aimed at teachers and staff of all the mental health resources available to them, both in person and virtually.
In order to be as nitpicky as possible, you misspelled broaden.
I should have. Yep. Okay. I still did. What am I doing? Thank you. My dyslexia. Or are you, or maybe I was just thinking about Gordon.
Nope, still misspelled, at least from what I'm seeing.
All right. Spell it for me.
Broaden.
B-R. Oh. Does this keep happening? B-R-O.
A-D-E-N.
Okay. Broaden. One meeting I misspelled pole.
I literally love that.
Yeah, it was just the wrong pole.
Yeah.
P-O-L-E.
It's more pressure than you think to type while people are watching. And
Oh yeah,
you're doing a
yeah.
great
I
job.
might as well just be reading out loud in class, which is my next favorite thing to do. Okay, and then real quick to the request of information. I want to make sure that I got that. So request information about the process of updating TEA's long-range plan for technology, including whether there's input from stakeholders representing special education and those with knowledge of assistive and accessible technologies. So that I just pulled from Erin from the chat.
Perfect.
And then we had talked about, Marilyn coming back.
Yep.
Mrs. Cook coming back and requesting an update from the teacher vacancy task force.
Yep.
And then from our last meeting, we requested information from Justin for an OSEP update. I don't know if that's something we want to continue or.
I think so.
Okay. And then this was on our last one, we had requested an update from the digital curriculum advisory committee, but I think we may be good there.
Yep, we're gonna want that.
Okay. And then continue our work on the legislative report, which is what we're going to be doing from here on out.
Yep. Somebody remind me, because I've lost some time and calendar space due to a variety of my daughter's medical issues. Our next meeting is scheduled for when? Or have we talked about that?
I don't think we've talked about it, at least not to my knowledge, but.
Okay.
I don't think we have anything scheduled going forward yet.
Okay.
I think we scheduled up until this point.
Okay.
Before we move on to that, may I ask for clarification on something?
Sure.
On your request from TEA, did you want to request an overview of what the Inclusion Network currently has available as
Yes.
far as training for teachers?
Yes.
Okay, because I don't see that on the list.
Oh. Stephanie, would you put that in the chat?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Because cut and paste is way easier than having to remember. I am fully in support of this.
It is, and Stephanie knows all the people that we would need to contact, and so it will
Let's
be
not guess.
correct. Thank you so much. And then everything else on here is actually not applicable yet, because we haven't approved anything and we haven't adjourned. This is just my template that I update.
Look, this is incredibly helpful. Again, since there is no whiteboard, I am mighty happy to have you taking the extensive notes that you are.
You bet. I'm going to unshare my screen now, and then when it comes time to approve minutes, I'll put it back.
Sure,
up.
sure. If we could take an opportunity now to revisit the transition subcommittee that we haven't yet talked about, and look specifically at job training, vocation, the trainings that are needed, that Amy and Aaron and I, need to talk about, haven't yet. Amy, if I remember correctly from our conversation yesterday, we touched briefly on what that could look like. Do you have anything that you'd like to share with the group?
Well, we did talk about maybe some more job coaching. And we did talk about adding some COVID related recommendations, because some people lost their opportunity at 18 plus because of COVID. And we've also been thinking a lot about how employment and getting ready for employment could change in our digital issues. So I think there could be some crossover between transition and the accessibility committee, because of how many jobs have become more accessible by working remotely. So I think maybe we need to have a little bit of crossover there.
Okay.
Is there anything you wanted to add?
Dovetailing on that, I think that it would be prudent to make a legislative recommendation to further examine the changes in how our special needs, our special education students are transitioning in an increasingly digital world, and what technologies can be made available so that students in our 18 plus programs have the resources that they need going into, say, a work from home environment. And what support is available from the school district in that regard. Because as we all know, this is an ever evolving situation. And
right. And from a personal standpoint, when I had my technology evaluation from TWC, we were assuming that I would have an attendant with me. And when it came to pass that HHSC and the federal government decided you can't have an attendant on the clock if you're working remotely and they're working remotely, you can only have an attendant when you're working remotely if they're in the same room with you. Then I had to figure out how I was going to use all this assistive technology with no one, which means I need extra assistive technology or different assistive technology. So especially when we're in a situation where state services have a 90-year waiting list if you get on them today, we need to start thinking about the type of job supports and the type of life supports that are not contingent on having a person and are contingent on using more technology. So I'm right there with you.
okay, let's go ahead and add that in. Is there anything else that we're missing on that one? Aaron, thank you. I knew I could count on you.
Mine's more of a question than any sort of solution. I don't know who may know the answer to this. Is there data collected about successful transition? Like, do we know, does it work? So like, the reason I ask is I know with Voc Rehab, on the governance committee, the Voc Rehab representative would give us data saying that they're tracking successful placements. Because the whole idea of providing Voc Rehab is, how do we get somebody that needs support to enter the workforce actually into the workforce?
Okay, yeah.
Obviously, transition planning is, geared toward not always workforce, but not always post-secondary education, those sorts of things. But the transition plan has a definition of success in it.
Yeah.
But do we follow up in any way saying, yes, they're actually successfully making it to that goal or those goals, so that we have some sort of feedback loop that says, this is what makes for successful transition planning, and this is what generally fails with transition planning.
Nope, that
I don't
makes-
know the answer to that, but
Aaron,
Aaron,
can I answer that question from my own experience?
Go for
okay,
it.
N of one, but yeah, that's I'd love to hear it.
So, my high school followed up with me 1 year after I graduated, and only 1 year after I graduated, and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to college." And they said, "Yep, check, your transition plan worked." And I know for most of my peers, that may not be really a good check of whether the transition plan worked, because just because you entered college doesn't mean you finished. And people may need more than 1 year to implement a plan. And, if you're going from college to a job or trying to do a job in college at the same time, you're not asking the right question. So I don't know if it's changed since I graduated, because I graduated in 2006, but at least for, one person's experience, technically they asked a question and technically they checked a box, but was it the right question? Maybe not. So I think it's more of, do they have data, but is it robust data is another question,
That's great feedback, Amy.
Okay.
Stephanie, is there a resource within TEA that does any sort of follow-up on successful transition plans that may know of? Is it simply a 1 year after, or is that done at an LEA level? Is there guidance that TEA provides on how to track or assess success of transition plans?
They do track it, and they do still do the 1 year follow-up. But as far as anything other than that, I am not the person to speak to that, but we could invite Jerry back if you want him to address that question.
I was going to say, to your answer on the LEA, that's done by TEA for our SPP indicator 14. And it's post year. All the districts are required to upload contact data for students and parents, so that 1 year following the state. Right now they contract with Gibson Consulting and they follow up and do a survey. It's nice that the district did that too, but typically, I don't know of all the districts that do that, but it is done at a state level. And then we get regional reports for each district about what the students were doing. A lot of times though, there is a hard time contacting, because a lot of times students are putting in like their email that they're using in high school. And so we've been in a lot of work around trying to make sure we get good updated information so we could follow up better. But there's lots of indicator 14 reports going back for many years to kind of show some of that data.
Okay. Thank you, you rock star, you. Stephanie, let's make sure that for our next meeting, we have Jerry here to comment extensively about that. Is there anything further for the transition subcommittee? Seeing nothing. This has been a most informative goings on today, and I'm delighted with everything that we're hearing. I would encourage subcommittees all to meet in the intervening month or months before our next meeting, so that at our next meeting, we can start putting together and making a report and getting a rough draft together. Amy, can I ask a favor of you?
Of course, my lovely chair. What favor would you ask?
Would you mind emailing the last report to Stephanie so that we can get it out to the committee and make sure that we know what the format is?
I have a link for it right now. I can put it in the chat if you like.
This is why you and I play so nicely together in the sandbox. Yes, absolutely do that. If for no, at this point, committee, it is simply for informational purposes only, so that we can start getting an idea of how we want the report to look.
Jen, this is Agatha. Would you like me to put a link to the report in the minutes?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
If we've got it right here, right now, because you ladies are such rock stars, then there should be then no excuse for the members of this committee to not have that directly at their fingertips.
Minute. No.
Then on this fine note, I think it would be apropos to start thinking about when our next meeting should take place. Real quick, Aaron's got something.
What is, as chair, what is your expectation for what the subcommittee should bring to the next meeting, whenever that happens to be?
What an excellent question. Simply put, any further discussion within your committee, subcommittee, of the topics that we've discussed today. Really, at our next meeting, I'd like to start finalizing what our recommendations are. I think that we've got a fantastic midway point at this point, but let's be realistic, folks. We're looking at the calendar and July is halfway through. If we're looking at September or October for our next meeting, I think that it would be prudent to, if not have the committee report fully put to bed, we need to be at least 3/4 of the way. So I would encourage all subcommittees to meet virtually and be prepared to make final recommendations in case we have to have anybody else from TEA come and speak.
Jen, what format would you like those recommendations in? Would you like to have them in rough draft form?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
So
Simply,
we would
so that we, I'm sorry, go ahead, dear.
No, just to clarify, so you would want to see the recommendations in a rough draft form, and written out And of course, looking at how our last report was written, similar to that.
Yep.
Okay, and then as subcommittees, if anything from our last report pertains to our current report, we're able to incorporate that and then make changes as we see fit. And then would we be trying to approve certain recommendations and then further discuss and change the others?
Yes.
Fantastic.
So then with that, if everyone could please pull up their calendars, personal and professional, and let's take a look and see. I know that with the beginning of the school year upon us, I am hesitant to recommend anything in August simply because I don't hate us that much. But I would certainly entertain dates in September and October.
I will say this might not be something that's very popular, but with their, with the updates that we're asking for TEA and the level of fine tooth comb it's going to take us to go through in the individual, I suggest that maybe we try and do a meeting in September and then maybe one in October as well.
Yeah. I was thinking that because while we have a wonderful place that we are right now, and I am not nearly as nervous about this as I was when I came into this meeting today, I want to make sure that, one, we are respectful for the committee's time and expectations, but two, we don't wake up thinking, doggone it, we've got too much to do and we're never going to get this thing done. I'm too old and too tired for the college version of all-nighter. And it's no more, it hurts more than it used to, and it's no longer fun. I don't want to be behind that 8 ball. With that in mind, I'd like to propose a couple of dates in September for our initial meeting. I know that Wednesdays are generally a popular day for our committee, especially since most of us meet virtually. I'd like to propose September 21st. And I would also like to take a look at Tuesday, September 27th.
Jen, I can just tell you, never mind. Wrong. I was reading the wrong month. Never mind. We're available.
If it helps, I did that yesterday professionally and had to remind one of my clients that I know I scheduled a meeting and it was my idea, but I'm going to be at a CAC meeting because I looked at my professional calendar, not my personal one.
So on that answer, Jen, will we continue to be able to meet virtually? I know at some point when I first came on, there was talk about moving back to in person.
At this point, unless Stephanie and the powers that be tell me differently, as I understand the open meetings requirements, as long as I am in person, we can continue to meet virtually. And I have every intention of remaining so.
So the 27th would be a Tuesday, correct?
Correct, yeah.
I've
got another meeting on the 28th, so look at that. 27th it is.
I am slightly better on the 21st, but I can do either.
Okay. Anybody else? I mean, I'm proposing those 2 meeting dates in September because those are the ones that I'm available. The room at large here in person is saying that we can do either one. So
I would prefer the 21st if we are going to look at October as well.
Okay. Yeah, Then I propose September 21st at from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Is there consensus on that? I'm getting thumbs up from the room here. All right, look at that. Do we want to go ahead and get an October meeting scheduled? All right, I'm seeing a lot of head nodding. How do we feel about October 19th, also a Wednesday?
I can do that, but only till 11, but I don't know if how long we project or if.
Yeah. I think that depends entirely on how productive we are in September. And in between. Do I have consensus on October 19th? All righty.
I can make it work.
You are an officer and a scholar, and I appreciate that about you. Stephanie, I think the better question now is, can we get space?
I will check with the service center to see now that we have dates. Yeah.
Okay. Outstanding.
May I make a suggestion? I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but is it possible to get our agenda and all of the attachments the Friday before our Wednesday meeting and not the day before of our meeting?
Well, I am required to send those out 30 days prior, so that's what I did. And I just sent them yesterday just as a reminder, but you should have gotten them way back in May. I think I sent those.
I think I got missed in May because interestingly, I was looking, because I had it penciled in that we were meeting today, but I was looking for the invite for the last 2 weeks and I never got anything until I was checking personal emails last night. That's why I sent the email, oh gosh, because I already had this scheduled conference call. So I don't know what happened.
My apologies for that. I think, did anybody else have problems getting it? Did I send it out to you guys in May? Well, you weren't, Marissa, you weren't here yet. So, right, you didn't join us yet. So yeah. Okay. Well, I'll make sure I have just a master list, Joanne. I'll make sure you're on there, but I'm pretty sure you are.
It was because it was coming from you and I have Keith's swink in my brain, maybe it accidentally deleted or something. So
yeah, I don't know. My apologies. If that ever happens, please feel free to email me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Agatha, can I ask you to share a screen so we can take a look at minutes?
Sorry. Wrong one. I have too many things open. 1 second.
It feels like my brain. I have 16 tabs open and there's a cat running around somewhere.
Okay, here we are. Okay. So let me just get us back down to where we left off. Sorry if I'm making y'all dizzy. Okay, so we left off at requests. Oh, and then let me put in, so should I say possible meeting dates? Future meeting dates?
I like proposed meeting dates versus possible.
And we said September
21,
21st. And oh, I gotta have the fattest fingers today.
You are absolutely fine.
And
are right.
October
19th.
19th.
Agatha, did you want to add to this list? I think we had a last minute request from about what data is available following transition,
Yes.
about the success of the transition.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, how do we want that to read? We're requesting information.
Yep. Hang on. I've got it in the chat, maybe.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Nope. We were going to have request information on transition planning. And data pertaining to postgraduate transition implementation.
And success.
Does that look right, Amy?
Looks right to me.
All right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
It might have been captured up there, but wasn't there the thing about someone coming from the mental health side to talk about all the things that are already available?
Agatha, did we put in the link to the legislative report that's in the chat that we were going to put in the minutes?
Yes, I put it up here.
Okay.
The link to the last legislative report under where we were talking about the legislative report before the subcommittees.
You are a gentlewoman and a scholar. I appreciate you greatly.
And so did I capture that, April? Or whoever was just, did I capture what it was? Let's see, request update teacher vacancy task.
Not sure.
Because there was something about digital, yeah. Because we were asking Jerry to come back.
Mm-hmm. This one, I think, Stephanie, and I don't remember who the person is right now at TEA that's over this, but I know that I sit in on a lot of meetings with, and there's someone who's leads all of that mental health work. And I think you were going to invite them to come just say what's already available so we don't make recommendations that are already available.
Right. So, yeah, so I think maybe you just can put request for updates about current mental and behavioral health.
I'm sorry, current and
current mental health. I'm sorry, you could say mental and behavioral health. And I think that you guys specifically want for students with special needs, because there is a whole nother department that handles overall.
Yes.
Yep. Got it.
We've got a long list of requests.
Yes, you
Got a
do.
lot of people to talk to.
So, okay. So just making sure I've captured everything to everyone's satisfaction.
This looks great, Agatha.
I move to approve the minutes.
I second.
Amy, and I'm sorry, who seconded?
April.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen
Okay.
and, oops. Okay. So we have approved the minutes.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Second.
Nicely done.
We are rock stars. Don't let anybody tell us different.
That's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is always a distinct pleasure serving with you. Let's go change the world.
Right.